right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody. How y'all doing? Welcome to another episode of the Conflict Management Podcast. I am your host, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Half Man, Half Amazing, the great one. Jokes aside, but joke aside, I am Mr. Man Event, Malik Miles. Welcome. How are you guys doing? And my co-host.
The future Hall of Famer, the one namer, the Oracle. It's Edon. We are back again, and this time after a absolute news bomb from Dana White about the next 4 or 5 months of everything that's going to be happening at the UFC.
Yeah, man, there was so much that has came up in the last month and last not even month, the last week, 24 hours, 48 hours. And like we said, this is our this is perfect for us because like we say, we cover the news, the fights, and the highlights going on in the world of combat sports. This is the perfect situation for that. The I think one of the big ones, Alexa Grasso versus Natalia Silva, two of two of the best fighters in the female flyweight division. We said that this fight may happen. We're both big fans of Natalia Silva, both big fans of Grasso. Um, we, I'm so amped about this because I think this would be for the next belt. This would be who's going to fight for the belt next, in my opinion, right? Because a lot of people was curious to see if it was going to be Wei Lee and Valentina or Manon Fiorot and Valentina. Now it looks like it's Valentina versus Manon Fiorot on the same card as Alexa Grasso versus Natalia Silva, which is crazy work. We got Michael Chandler, Patty Pimblett. We got what's another one that was that the Diego Lopez versus Volkanovski and just like a variety of other fights that we're going to talk about. But yeah, man, crazy news in fight week. Ilya vacating the belt, but yeah, for the women's flyweight match. Tell me, what do you think? What's your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting because on UFC 314 in Miami, they're going to have Yan Xiaonan versus Virna Jandiroba.
Jandiroba. Mm-hmm.
So they set that up with the last title challenger versus the next kind of up and coming, kind of like who you would think would be next for the belt. And then at UFC 315, the next pay per view, they have Valentina versus Manon Fiorot. And on that same card is Grasso versus Silva. So it seems like they're kind of pushing it out there, kind of letting it develop and see what happens, because we might still get Valentina versus Wei Lee. That might still happen. It looks like if Valentina wins and you have either the same people who have already fought for the belt win or the performances aren't that good, it seems like the UFC's setting it up where they might still pivot to that Wei Lee versus Valentina fight and make that super fight happen. But they're giving themselves some options in terms of if Virna can go and have a performance that makes a really good argument to the fans that she should be next. I think you could see that. And then if Grasso or Silva have a really big performance on pay-per-view on the same night as Valentina is going to fight Fiorot, assuming Valentina retains, they could make a good argument for themselves to be the next one, and they're going to have that shot to speak directly to the fans that night after either one of them wins to say, hey, I'm coming after the belt next. I deserve it. Look at the performance I just put in. And they might take that moment for themselves. So a lot of options for the UFC with their two main weight classes as far as entertainment for the women's divisions. So a lot
Yeah.
of nice options they set themselves up for.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like you had mentioned, so much going on in that for those fights in general, but for that whole division as a whole. But I'm kind of curious, right? So you've been calling it since the beginning for Natalia Silva. You've been like, hey, she's like future star, potential future champ in the making. You put me on to Natalia Silva. Like, we're both fans, and we think she's. I was like, after I saw her fight, I was like, oh man, she's dope. Like, she's definitely like future star in the making. I've been, as anyone who's listened to this podcast knows, I've been a big Alexa Grasso fan, big Alexa Grasso support since the very beginning. Said she was going to be a champ, she became champ, right? And now, both, I feel like it's fair to say your favorite fighter at women's flyweight and my favorite fighter in general and favorite women's fighter at flyweight are going head to head. We thought it would happen for the belt. Now it's happening as a number one contenders fight, which I believe it's going to be number one contenders fight. You have two of the best strikers at flyweight, arguably two of the best, top five best across all three women's division. What's your feeling? How do you see the fight going? What's your prediction? I think we could both tell like where we may go, but I'm curious to see how you break down the fight.
Yeah, so I would say in this one, Natalia Silva is definitely one of the ones in the last like 5 years or so where I've seen them the first time and she stuck out immediately to me as far as her skill set and how advanced she already was entering the UFC. I always kind of knew that this was coming. I wasn't sure exactly what timeline it was going to be, but this is absolutely the type of stage her talent deserves. As far as how it actually plays out, I think Natalia Silva can strike with anybody and win that matchup. So I think if this was a kickboxing fight or like a Muay Thai fight, I'd take Natalia Silva to win by decision. The thing I want to see is the grappling and the jiu-jitsu of Grasso is what kind of gives me pause or concern a little bit. But I think that the range that they start at on the feet is going to be Silva's range. So Grasso has to come inside to get to a boxing range where she can be more effective striking, because the kickboxing range favors Silva, in my opinion. So Grasso will have the power advantage with the strikes because Silva usually does more of a accumulation style. She puts a lot of volume. She's more Max Holloway type of striker than a power puncher, sit down on him kind of attacker. So I think you're going to see Silva start out with the advantage, and then it's going to be on Grasso to take it and get inside more and move forward more and try and get through that storm. And she's going to have to be more, I think she'll be more effective at it and be definitely the toughest challenge that Silva's had so far, because I think her footwork is going to be a lot better, and without being a put down, I think she'll be more intelligent on how she enters the pocket than, say, Jessica Andrade was against Natalia Silva. So I think that she'll have some moments by doing that intelligently. But I also think Natalia Silva's base athleticism and her takedown defense and balance will be enough to see it through. So I think there'll be moments for sure for Grasso. I think this is going to be a close one. But on the balance of it all, is this 5 rounds or 3 rounds?
I don't know.
Okay, it's the co-main.
Yeah,
I don't think they've
because I
said if
don't
it's going
think
to be 5 rounds.
right. I think it's going to be 3 rounds. That's just what I like. Think since it's not going to be a title fight, but I do. I think it's going to be three. I think that
Okay.
of the fights that we had mentioned right earlier, the Valentina versus Manon Fiorot, it's a good fight. I largely think Valentina's going to win that fight because you have a really good kickboxer in Manon Fiorot versus the pound for pound best female fighter in the UFC. Manon Fiorot is good, but I think Valentina's going to sweep her. Then you have the Verna Jandiroba fight because who you said she was going to fight again?
Verna's fighting Yan Shannon.
Yan Shannon.
Mhm.
Yan Shannon is a good fighter, but I feel that Verna Jandiroba is so tough and so durable and very good just all around that she's not, it's not that excite, because that's strawweight, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes.
It's not like the excitement of like a Wei Li, where she's coming out with the dynamic striking, this and that. There's a lot of exciting fighters in that division. And I don't think, not as a knock, but I don't think Virna is a draw. Like she's not like there's nothing about her skill set that's like, oh man, super eye catching, oh this and that, either the striking, the grab, this and that. But she's very good at what she does. She has very good, just very good all around. And we've seen when she went against Lupe Godinez, who's my favorite in the division, who I thought she was gonna beat her. And then, she put it together and you've seen her kind of put through. I think she beats Yana Shannon. But the Grasso and Natalia Silva fight, like you mentioned, I think of the three fights that are coming up for strawweight and flyweight, I think this is the most exciting of the three, right? Because I think that the other two are, for better, like in my opinion, I think those are locks, right? Those other two fights, I think they're locks. Are they the most exciting fight? Not necessarily. They're good fights, not the most exciting. At least from going into it, right? But the Grasso Silva fight, that's going to be also a good fight, but also it's a very exciting fight, right? All of Natalia Silva's fights going into this, prior to this fight, I've chosen Natalia Silva. Like, since you kind of like put me onto her and showed me, hey, check out this lady and like she's gonna be epic. I checked her out. Yeah, she is definitely star quality. The striking, the taekwondo, the world-class taekwondo ability, right? Her striking is bar none some of like the best, one of the best, if not like, in that division when she was coming up. Definitely of all the fighters she's faced so far, hers is bar none the best of the fighters she's come across so far, right? Like we saw during the Jessica Andrade fight, we saw through a variety of her other fights that she has the striking advantage over most of her opponents. And even that spinning back kick, which was crazy, that spinning back kick finish, which was crazy. And we've seen her go up against, former champions and Jessica Andrade. We thought that was going to be the hardest fight for her up until this point. And it was. Everyone's like, oh man, Jessica Andrade, she's super tough, super strong. Like she's got heavy punches, knockout power, got submission ability, former champion. This will be the big test for her. And Natalia Silva made it look like just another day in the office. Like she walked through Jessica Andrade, which going into it, I think we both was like, okay, this would be her biggest test, but we both were like, she's gonna win that fight. And I thought she was gonna. I'm very big on Natalia Silva. I thought she was gonna walk through her, and when she did, I was kind of like, I was surprised, but also I was kind of like, I kind of expected just her speed, her explosiveness, the athleticism. Like when it comes to the striking, very exciting to watch someone that I think it will be a future champion. I think that, and then you have Alexa Grasso, very top tier boxing skills. She has the best boxing in the division. Has one of the top strikers in that division as well. And when she first started, her first three fights were a combined total of 63 seconds, right? Like she was putting in work. And then, through the ups and downs, now that she's kind of at the top of her game, after that trilogy with Valentina, we've seen her grappling and her submission game kind of like grow and develop. And now that, we've talked about it before, I think really now that Alexa Grasso has everything rounded out, like the striking, the grappling, the jiu-jitsu, I really don't feel like there's anyone that could beat her up until this point. That's just me and my own bias of being a fan. But just when you look at her game, she's always had great striking. She's always been like one of the best strikers in the division. But once she kind of like rounded out the rest of her game with the grappling and the jiu-jitsu, I was like, man, who's gonna stop her? You know what I mean? And had that and then I think when you face someone like a Valentina, who is the pound for pound best female fighter across all three divisions, and you finish her not just by strikes, but you submit the best, and then you fight the best female fighter on the planet a second time to a decision. And then on the third fight, it goes another 5 rounds, and you lose that one, but to a decision. I feel like you don't have those kind of like that kind of trilogy, and not just be on another level afterwards, right? So I think that, me personally, I think Alexa Grasso gets it. I think it will be a tough fight. I wonder if it will be the grappling or submission ability that kind of is the difference maker in that fight. But I think that this fight is just going to be, when you have two of the best strikers, two of the best strikers in the division, I think we're going to get like a striking extravaganza, right? Like, I think it's going to be a fireworks show. I think that it's going to be exciting. I wonder if it's going to be just, hey, we're two the best when it comes to striking. Hey, my boxing against your taekwondo. Let's see what it do. Let's make it do what it do. If you play Tekken, it's Steve versus Harang. You know what I mean? I think that, but I think Alexa Grasso got it. I think just, the overall skill and then the championship experience puts her over. But I think that this will definitely be Natalia Silva's biggest fight, because I think if you can beat Alexa Grasso, I don't see who else is outside of Valentina that you're going to lose to. You know what I mean? Like, I've chosen Alexa Grasso all of her fights up until now, and it's going to pick her going into this one. But yeah, for Natalia Silva, this is the biggest moment of her career, I feel like, up into this, because I feel like you beat Alexa Grasso, I don't see who else you lose to in the division. Because if you can beat her, that means you're definitely beating Manon Fiorot. If she happens to pull off the upset against Valentina, I think that if you put Manon's kickboxing versus Natalia Silva striking, Natalia Silva clears her. I think so. It just, her striking is just so on another level. And then you put her up against Valentina. If you can beat Alexa Grasso, I think it's a lot closer. I think you can beat Valentina. I think she'll be able to beat Valentina, because you beat the person who took her to the furthest that anyone else has taken her, other than Amanda Nunes. I think this is your how people say, the kingmaker, or in her case, the queen maker. You know what I mean? If you can win that, it's straight to the championship. But if Alexa Grasso beats Natalia Silva, a lot of hype is behind her. Natalia Silva's a surging contender. A lot of people are very excited about her. You beat her. Hey, you get that Valentina, what do you call it? Quadrilogy? The fourth fight?
The fourth.
Right? I think Alexa Grasso wins that one, because then that one's for all the marbles, because they fought the first time, Alexa Grasso wins by submission finish. Fight a second time, get a draw. Third time, Valentina gets it. So technically, they're 1-1-1 on the record. So this fourth fight would be for all the marbles. Kind of like how the Brandon Moreno versus Davison Figueroa, how that went, kind of 4 fights. The other quadrilogy. I think this will be the first quadrilogy in women's MMA. But if Manon Fiorot manages to pull off the seemingly impossible, I think Alexa Grasso definitely beats Manon Fiorot. And no disrespect to Manon Fiorot.
If Fiorot manages to get it, and because of the kind of back and forth nature of the Grasso one. Like, let's say, or if Valentin is injured and they say, okay, we're not going to run that back. Fiorot is going to fight somebody else. I think one, we lose the Wei Li fight. Wei Li's not coming up to fight Fiorot. She's going to stick around and meant her 115 status. And then definitely the winner of this fight draws into Fiorot, in my opinion. I don't think
Same.
especially because of, again, I don't know the reasons or whose fault it is or whatever, but Valentina hasn't been a super active champion. So if I had to guess, if you're the UFC and Fiorot manages to upset, you probably try and turn it around quickly, get to one of Grasso or Silva, and then after that one, you see, okay, well, now what do we do? Because Valentina's on a schedule of fighting like once a year right now. Again, not totally her fault, and sometimes you've been waiting for kind of other contenders to emerge, and so if it's not her and Grasso, it's kind of been like, well, if one of them's injured, let's just wait because we can't do a bigger fight than them two right now because the other girls haven't been making the argument enough, kind of loud enough, and getting the attention to demand an interim situation or something like that. So definitely a lot to kind of play out with that. But let's just hope we get it because that those fights are scheduled for May. So we're sitting
Yeah.
here kind of at the end of February. So hopefully these cards can kind of stay intact for the
Intact.
most part.
Yeah,
Because
because
there's some good stuff on there. It's the 315 in particular. You got Shavkat's hurt, so
Sean
uh,
Brady.
Bilal
No, but
JDM,
JDM. My bad. Sorry.
yeah, and then Valentina versus Fiorot in the co-main, and then Gilbert Burns versus Morales and Grasso Silva. I mean that
That's a
main card's
stacked
nuts.
card.
Yeah, Montreal getting a treat.
Yeah, and like, dude, like real quick on that last point is the for anyone who doesn't know, and I think we've all like know, right? I think that maybe just because of uh there's been like that quadrilogy, the trilogy where, like you said, that's the biggest fight. But I think for any new fans, they don't may who may not know is just that new fans of the sport is Valentina is she's the pound for pound best female fighter in the world for a reason. Like literally outside of Amanda Nunes and Alexa Grasso, she has not come across any real she's like ran through every challenger that's ever challenged her for the belt. Like if we think about she hasn't come across really any significant pushback outside of those two. That just shows you how great she is. But not if, but when Alexa Grasso reclaims the flyweight belt, I think she'll be the only other two-time flyweight champion in women's flyweight history outside of Valentina, right?
I'd have to think. I think so. Let me double check that.
And why do that? I have a hypothetical for you because like we're gonna get into all the other major fights and all this stuff, like the Michael Chandler versus Patty fight, the Ilya moving up to fight Islam for the super fight, like all that stuff. But before that, hypothetical for you, by courtesy of Ariel Hawani and the people at Uncrowded when they talked about this, right? So it's a kind of a two-parter for you, right?
Hmm.
So there is 4 teams, right? Team USA, Team Russia, Team Brazil, and Team Great Britain, right? Each team has 5 fighters to represent them. So the two-parter I will ask you is who has the strongest lineup, right? And then the second part to it is if they do a 1v1 kind of like, did you ever watch Yu Yu Hakusho growing up? Any? Or like any of those like tournament style, or if it was like a wrestling tournament style, like a
Hmm.
Mortal Kombat 1v1, Dragon Ball Z, the World Martial
Yeah.
Arts Tournament 1v1 style, right?
Mhm.
who's coming in first and who's coming in second based on these lineups, right?
Okay.
So the lineup that they talked about, and the lineup they put together was, or they talked about, was for 155. You have Usman Nurmagomedov representing Team Russia. You have, let's see, Dustin Poirier representing Team US. Paddy Pimblett representing Team Great Britain, and Charles Oliveira, the legendary Super Saiyan, representing Team Brazil. For 170, you have, oh no, 135, you have Peter Yan representing Team Russia, Sean O'Malley representing Team Team USA. There is Davison Figueroa, the God of War, representing Team Brazil, and Mohamed Makayev representing Team Great Britain. You have 170, Hamzat Chimaev, the Wolf, representing Team Russia. Let's see, I believe Sean Brady, yes, Sean Brady representing Team USA. The Nightmare Carlos Prates representing Team Brazil. And let's see, Leon Edwards representing Team GB. And then 185 middleweight, you have Bo Nickel, Kyle Bahayo, Michael Venom Page, and actually, yeah. And then heavyweights, you have Tom Aspinall, uh, Alex Pereira, John Jones. So I'll just, as a quick run through again, Team Russia is Islam Makhachev, Peter Yan, Usman Nurmagomedov, Alexander Volkov, and Hamzat Chimaev. Team USA is John Jones, Bo Nickel, Dustin Poirier, Sean Brady, Sean O'Malley. Team Brazil is Caio Bahayo, Carlos Prates, Davison Figueroa, Charles Oliveira, Alex Pereira. And then Team GB, Team Great Britain is Tom Aspinall, Leon Edwards, Michael Venom Page, Mohamed Makayev, and Paddy Pimblett. Who has the strongest lineup? And then if you went 1v1, if they went 1v1, each person sends up a representative who's coming in first and second. So start with who has the strongest lineup.
I kind of like that Team Brazil. The Team Brazil lineup is real tough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're kind of a little bit more up and coming, you might say, than a couple of the other ones, but I think as far as where they're at right now, that Team Brazil lineup's real hard to beat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. I think when you're looking at Team Brazil probably has the toughest lineup of just you have rookie of the year Carlos Prates, what, eight fights, 8 knockouts, 8 walk-off KOs. And then I think he's won a performance bonus in each of his fights because the knockouts have been insane. You have future, who I think is the future champion at middleweight, Caio Bahayo from the Fighting Nerds. You have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Dave Sanfero, who's a 2-time champion at I think featherweight it was when he was fighting. And then you have the legendary Super Saiyan Charles Oliveira, former 2-time middle lightweight champion, or I think he was 2-time. And then has the most submissions wins in UFC history. And then you have Poatan, Alex Pereira, two-division champion. Right. Yeah. I think, and yeah, that might be the toughest one. And then who do you think if they went 1v1, who's coming out on top in first place? Who do you think is coming second?
Is there a way to see all of them at the same time? Because trying to make a mental
Okay.
picture of them is difficult for me to 1 and 2.
See, let me see if I can do this, if this will work. I'll
Is there
send
like
you
a
the
link?
picture. I'll
Okay.
send you the screenshot that I took, and then that way you can have it. There you go.
Okay.
I think, in my personal opinion, I think think any team that has John Jones is is pretty hard to beat, right? Like I
Yeah.
feel like Team USA, we have a very strong lineup with John Jones, Bo Nickel, Dustin Poirier, Sean Brady, Sean O'Malley. I think Team USA and Team Brazil probably have the strongest like overall lineup. I think all of the teams have like really strong people or strong picks, but it might be like one or two. And I think that because John Jones's fight is going to be a lock, right? Like John Jones is winning. I think John Jones beats Volkov. He beats Pereira. He beats Tom Aspinall. I think the Pereira one. I think like he clears Volkov. If we're just being honest, right?
Yeah.
I think Pereira is going to be like a very close fight. I feel like it's a toss up. Tom Aspinall is also a toss up. It's very like who do you pick on that one? I think it might just go down to preference, but I think that in the end, John Jones beats all four of these guys. So I feel like for heavyweight, Team USA gets that point.
Yeah, I'll go with that. They get one. I'll put Aspinall as two.
Mm-hmm.
And then at 55, I think you got to give it to Islam for now and put Charles as number two.
I can see it, but I think
Until we see a rematch, I think you got to give it to him.
yeah, I really because I feel that like I see what you're saying, and I think yeah, because I think he definitely beats Islam definitely beats Patty, and then he's beaten Dustin. Charles Oliveira though, the legendary Super Saiyan, like I think based on the body of work, and I think if they did do a rematch, I think Charles Oliveira beats Islam. But I think if they did a rematch, I don't know if Dustin Poirier pulls it out. I feel like Dustin Poirier like could win, but I don't know. Uh, that's tough. Yeah, you know what? Okay, I'll say that like Islam gets that one because he has not lost up to this point. But I really think Charles. I think it might go with Charles and then Islam second. You know what I mean? Like, but the so yeah, the if we give John Jones that point for Team USA, and then Islam the point for Team Russia. Let's see. I think that 185. I think that's a point for Team Brazil with Caio Bahaio because I think that Caio beats. I think Caio beats Hamzat. I know everyone's very big on Hamzat, and Hamzat is like in round one. He's a very hard fighter to beat. He's coming out of
Mm.
the gate 1,000 miles per hour, but we've kind of seen as the rounds go on into like the second, the third. We saw that with Gilbert Burns. We saw that with the Kamaru Usman fight. Towards the kind of latter rounds, he start. It's not as that with that same intensity. And Kyle Bahio has shown that like no matter what round it is, he's super dangerous and has good striking, good grappling, good jiu-jitsu. I think while Bo Nickel is very strong, has very strong wrestling. I think that I think that's probably the closest matchup is the Bo Nickel versus Kyle, but I think Kyle takes that one. The Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, it's until kind of Bo Nickel has elite competition. I agree with you. I like Kaio better than him at this point. Um, I'm still a big believer in Sean Brady and what he can do,
Same.
but he kind of needs that next one. It's especially when he fights Leon Edwards. I
Mm-hmm.
think he's got the talent to beat Leon. I don't know if he has
Mm-hmm.
that like mental game and experience yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think we need to see and why I think the Leon matchup's such a good one for UFC London, to have that experience to be the main event, and to kind of go through that process of, you're the main event, you're the one who's up top on the card, you're carrying the expectation, you're going to fight for 5 rounds, you're fighting an elite former champion who is also super motivated coming into it because he's coming off a loss last fight in his home country, and you're back in his home country again, and he's got something to prove. So I think we're going to learn a lot about Sean Brady in that matchup,
Mhm.
and about where he is relative to the division. If he's ready now to be a young champion, or if he's still a guy who's kind of figuring it out on his way.
I do like the Sean Brady pick because I think he gets the point for Team USA in that round because, like you said, like Sean Brady. Sean Brady, I think, yes, I think he's very good. I do like his skills. I think that the hardest matchup, the closest match, I think the like Leon is former champion. He's great, and I think he does well. Carlos Prates also like just a beast, right? Like this dude is rookie of the year. Sean is like just on top of it, right? I think that, but I do think, and then Usman Nurmagomedov, he's very good too. But I think that I think goes. I think for right now it will go like Sean Brady 1, Carlos Prates 2, because I think that if you look at it, I think Carlos Prates beats Leon Edwards. He beats Usman Nurmagomedov, but I don't know if he beats Sean Brady. I think Sean Brady gets the win over him, and I do think Sean Brady beats Usman, and I think he beats Leon. But I don't know about. But I think the Carlos Prates fight is close, but I think Sean Brady is. I think he gets. I think he gets the win. I think it's a close fight, but I think he gets the win over Carlos Prates. What do you think?
I think that's fair to say for now. It's like we said, with some younger guys, it's tough to tell where they're at to this point, because before the Bilal Sean Brady fight, I would have said Sean Brady beats Bilal because I think his
Mhm,
talent is better.
mhm.
Um, but I think on the night the mental game wasn't there yet for Sean Brady. So it's tough to kind of tell because Carlos Prates is checking all the boxes where he is right now, but could he step up to the Sean Brady level quite yet? It is a kind of gray area that we don't know.
Right, and like I'm big on Carlos Prates, and I think he has potential to be a future welterweight champion. Right, I think Carlos Prates has the potential to be a future champion. Right, I think he's great, but like you said, it's still super early to see kind of like no, I said 8 fights. I think it's like 4 fights he's had, and 4 of them have all been walk-off KOs. But then I think I think once we see more fights, I think he has the potential to like go to the moon, but we don't know where he like stacks up in the top 5. You know what I mean? Or
Mm.
like amongst that. So that's why I put him as number 2 because I do think he beats the other 2 fighters, yeah, so I think that might go to him. And then who do you think wins the one the lineup between Figueroa, Makayev, Peter Yan, and then Sean O'Malley?
Hmm. I think maybe Figueiredo.
Same.
I know he hasn't had a matchup, and I'm no like Sean's the former champion that's also the heaviest, so you got that kind of going. But I think maybe Figueiredo would be able to get him with the grappling and some of the things he's shown. I don't know if his defense is good enough against Sean. Like, to me, that's the 1-2 is Sean might knock him out,
Yeah.
or Figueiredo's going to grind on him and get a decision.
Same. I think that's the 1-2 for me as well, is the Figueroa versus Sean O'Malley, because Sean O'Malley he's a sniper. He has very good offense, good striking. However, when it comes to grapplers, he does. I think that I think Figueroa being the champion that he was, I do think he either Sean O'Malley can get him out in the first, just being the sniper that is, or Figueroa just like grinds on him and like tires him out and makes him melt, and then get the submission or potentially get the finish off the striking. But I do think that like as it goes further on, the further the fight goes into the later rounds, Figueroa wins that fight. The probability of Figueroa winning gets higher and higher, exponentially higher, as like the fight progresses upwards to like the fifth round. But in the first round, I think it favors Sean O'Malley. So I think I think that's gonna be the one. But I think Figueroa wins that fight. Just me personally. But I think it goes Figueroa. Yeah. If so, yeah. As we kind of like look through it, like Sean O'Malley had trouble with Marab, and the more I look at it, right. So I think once we give it an overview, right. So that's 2 points for Team Brazil, 2 points for Team USA, 2 points for Team Brazil with a Caio Bahaio and Davison Figueroa win. 2 points for Team USA with the John Jones and Sean Brady win. 1 point for Team Russia with the Islam win. And unfortunately, no points for Team UK, but just because the other teams just, are so like stacked in the divisions that they have other people in. Because Tom
Yeah.
Aspinall is definitely a big win, I think, in any other matchup outside of John Jones. And then MVP, another big win outside of Caio Bahaio, Hamzat, and Bo Nickel. Like two very tough wrestlers, extremely talented wrestlers, and one extremely talented overall fighter, like
Yeah.
a all-around fighter. And then Leon Edwards is another big win in another matchup that wasn't uh like outside of his matchup, because Carlos Pratas, Sean Brady, that's a hard matchup. You know what I mean? Though so winning Muhammad Makayev is also would have been a good one, but I think that. But the more I look at it, right, as far as who I like, the strongest team as far as my own, I feel like I'm a fan of every person that's on Team Brazil. With Pereira, Oliveira, Bahaio, Prates, and Figueroa. I'm a fan of all five of these guys. And then I'm a fan of like 3 of the 5 from Team USA, and then 3 of the 5 from Team UK. And so I was like, oh man, this is a tough one. What about you?
Yeah. I think part of that might just also be Brazilian personality and the way that culturally it kind of expresses itself. I think it's really easy to root for a lot of Brazilians because they're usually really expressive and open. It's uh, there's not a lot of Brazilian fighters who you'd say like, oh, that guy's like even the kind of shy ones are kind of like, oh, but you could tell he's a nice guy, kind of shy. It's not like a loner type of like sometimes, uh, especially American UFC fighters who are culturally American. Like sometimes they got this like brash kind of like rub you the wrong way type of personality. Even if they're a little bit shy, it's kind of like a leave me alone type of shy.
Mm, when you had mentioned the Brazilian fighters, I think that like most of the fighters that have come from Brazil, right? Like
Mm.
have all almost, to my knowledge, a majority of them, if not like a lot of the majority of a lot of them, if not majority, if not all, like there's a lot of superstars that like are fan favorites. A lot of the fighters from yesteryear, like even currently, a lot of the fan favorites do come from Brazil. You got like we just mentioned, the top 5 in this one, Alex Pereira, who's a global superstar now, right? Like he's a shy guy. Like he himself has said he is shy himself, but the entire world loves Alex Pereira, right? Like Kyle Bahayo, another fan favorite who is like beloved by the MMA community. Charles Oliveira, another global superstar that is beloved by the MMA community and across the world. You know what I mean? Like Carlos Parates, if you're like been a fan of the sport for a while, you're pretty deep into it. If you know, you know. And he is an exciting fight style. Davison Figueroa, you have Anderson Silva, who's again another beloved legend. You have Amanda Nunes, another beloved legend. Like, you know what I mean? There's just Lyoto Machida. Like, there's so many fighters that have come, like, you know, so many superstars, legends, you know what I mean? And I think that, yeah, now that I think of it, yeah, a lot of them, and I feel like, if I'm not mistaken, like I think if we looked up the like stats, I think majority if of the champions come from the U.S. and Brazil, right? Of the
Yeah,
previous champions.
definitely over the history of the UFC for
Yeah,
sure. Most of them
over the
are
course of the
American
last
and
30
Brazilian.
years.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because I mean, you know what's crazy? I think that when you look back on it, the run that John Jones has been on, the like when you look at it's I was just thinking about this recently. He was there he's kind of fought through most like 4 different generations now, right? Like he was there during the Anderson Silva period, and then like back during the Rashad Evans and the Machitas and the Rampages, and then kind of as we moved forward, kind of was there through that next generation of fighters, and then even from now, from all the way back when Forrest Griffin was still in the UFC to like now with all these new superstars like Prates and Nickel and Leon and Cyril and Tom, like, yo, that's crazy. But then when I thought about, I was like, other superstars like GSP, right? Like Canada has had one guy, like one champion so far, but their one champion is one of the greatest of all time. So I feel like that's a pretty strong one. If you're gonna have one champion, to have the legend that is GSP representing like Canadian MMA, I feel like it's hard to have a better person. You know what I mean? Like GSP was such a like an ambassador of the sport, like a great ambassador of the sport. He's beloved by the MMA community and like the whole world. I don't know a person who does not like GSP.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, it's interesting the kind of waves that kind of layer out like in the ocean of MMA talent, because back in the day, how many Georgians were in the UFC
I
or
don't think any,
in
if I'm not
like
mistaken. I
advanced?
think maybe one outside
Yeah,
of Marab and Ilya. I think maybe one. To
that's
my knowledge, I could be wrong, but
like back in the
off the
day,
top
it
of my
felt
head.
like it was Canadians,
Mhm.
Americans, Mexicans, Brazilians. There were maybe a couple other like South
Like a
Americans.
handful of Japanese fighters, but
Yeah,
they
there
were
was
all already kind of towards the like the end of their careers by the time they came over.
yeah, and then there was like a couple Pacific Islanders, like Australians, but it kind of felt like you didn't have some of these other region and like France
France
MMA
didn't
was
have anybody, I think,
yeah,
if I'm not
MMA was
mistaken,
like illegal there for up until the last like 5, 10 years
up
or
until
something like that.
Cyril. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
like up until
So
like no Francis and kind of like Francis Cyril time.
yeah, so you had like North America, you had Brazil, you had Japan, you had Australia, and you had England was pretty much the European representative, and then Dutch kickboxers.
Yeah, like Overeem, Jermaine Durandamy, yeah, and I feel like over time, we've had for Team USA, we've had the Randy Couture, we've had John Jones, Daniel Cormier, Chris Weidman, uh, Frankie Edgar. Like I feel like we've had a pretty strong like set of fighters. But yeah, like
And
even
all the
when you,
teams, like all the teams
yeah,
were in the U.S. except for like Shoot to Box in Brazil
yeah,
and like
City Kickboxing, Team Lobo, but
yeah,
but
those
that's
those are the kind of new. The old ones were
yeah,
like Alpha Male, Team Quest,
yeah.
ATT in the earlier days,
American
Jackson Wink,
Kickboxing Academy,
yeah, AKA.
aka what was
Uh,
another one? Like the Black Zillions. That I think they became Sanford MMA, and then Sanford MMA became what is now Kill Cliff MMA, where a lot of fighters train. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, like you were saying, like a lot of the teams being here, and like American Top Team is still like
Longo
one of the biggest
Serra up
teams.
in New York.
Yeah, Longos area, yeah, and they got a big like roster of talent too. Because when you think about it, there's been, and it's crazy. There's been so many other superstars, like how you were saying, Lo, like over the years, that where some of them still doesn't have a champion. Like think about how many Japanese superstars have come to the UFC. Yet, like whether it was like or Japanese fighters or supers, you had Yushin Okami, you had Yoshihiro Akiyama, there was Takanori Gomi was here for a bit, Kid Yamamoto. There was like uh, we've had a lot, but not any champions yet. And then but I think with this new, like you said, new generation of fighters coming along, there's Tatsuro Tayo, Renya Nakamura, Rei Suruya, a lot of people who are potential, like, oh man. But yeah, it's really interesting to see. But it's also, speaking of interesting fights, how we was talking about Brazilian superstars.
Mm.
Diego Lopez is now getting one of the big news stories that came out over the last 48 hours is Diego Lopez getting a chance to fight Volkanovski for the vacant belt, which is crazy because we've both been fans of Diego Lopez. He is. I think this could
But
not
hold
have
on,
happened to.
before we get into the fight, can we talk about
Mhm.
how this fight came to be in the first place?
Yeah,
Which
for
is
sure.
Taporia gives up his belt and goes to 155. And apparently he said, or he's quoted as saying, that it's because of the weight cut that, the weight cut's getting too difficult. I don't know about
And
you. I
he
think
also
that's
said he also said that like he feels like there's nothing left for him to do at featherweight.
I get why he's saying that. I think that's an excuse, man. Like personally, I
Really?
think that's a super excuse. I think he could definitely make weight still. I think when you look at how he was able to perform in his last fight against Max Holloway, I don't think that he had trouble making weight. I think that's an excuse because he wants to go up to 55. And I think he's saying, I can't make it because he just wants to go there. And as far as having nothing else left to do, I kind of get what he means by that. But at the same time, this feels like a lot of copycat kind of McGregor stuff that, as we have gone on, doesn't really sit well with me. Like the fact that Aldo never got that rematch, like hurts me because he definitely earned that to be the champion forever in the
Oh yeah, the
UFC,
King
and
of
you don't
Rio.
get the
Like
rematch because
I
the
was
guy
surprised.
who they gave the shot to leaves the division as soon as he beats you. Like I don't know. I get that Max is up at 55 now, but to me, there was value in that running the Volk one again. I think we put too much sometimes on the one night, meaning that's what would always happen, sort of thing. Whereas, because that's not how I think about the sport at all. To me, the sport is really dependent on that night in that place at that time what were you able to do? How were you able to perform? So I think that to say, well, you did it once and it was convincing means that's how it always goes. I don't agree with, because I mean, look at the Volk, his two fights with Islam. So the first one was razor close. Like that was super, super close. It's the toughest fight that we've seen Islam in, other than the one he lost. So the current version of Islam, his toughest fight was the first fight against Volk. And then you come back in the second one and he flat knocks him out. So after the first one, you would say, "Oh, those guys are super close. Like they should
I
rematch
thought
that
Volk,
again."
yeah,
Yeah, and then in the
yeah.
second one, he knocked him out. So as much as you would say, "Well, we've seen it twice, and technically Islam got it on both, so we don't need to see it anymore." From an entertainment perspective, I totally get that. But from a prove who's better type setup, I don't think just because Taporia knocked Volk out that first time and it was like a big vicious knockout, I don't think that means, oh, that's just how that fight goes if we run it again another 5 times, is he always gets it. I think that we saw a little bit of that with the Moreno Figueiredo deal, which is those guys, if you're close in talent the way that those like elite level guys are at the top of the sport, little tiny details and margins and measures of like, okay, what was your sleep like? How are you coming into this? How hydrated are you? How was your weight cut? Uh, what's your mindset on the way to the fight? When you get in the locker room, did you do like a proper stretch technique? Are you warm? Like, I think all the small stuff really matters when you get to that top level with the elite talents.
Yeah, and I think that there's other fights like that too, where it's like the first fight between Charles Oliveira and Islam, the Francis and Cyril fight. There's so many where it was just
Or
like,
even John Jones, Cyril. Like, I'm not saying that
yeah,
Cyril beats John Jones necessarily, but I think if you ran that one back, he doesn't just get like swept off his feet in the first round of the fight like he did the first time.
yeah, yeah, because if you run it back, yeah, I think it's a much closer fight. I think that I think that sometimes the moment can get you, like you said, there's so many things of like the moment, the nerves with this and that and this and that and this, a lot of other things. Because I think, with that fight in particular, right? John Jones is the greatest fighter to ever walk the earth, right? If we're just talking about purely combat,
Yeah.
you'd be hard pressed to find another guy who could match his skill set. Like if we put every fighter in a room and just like, hey, who's coming out? It's John Jones. I know a lot of people say Islam's the pound for pound number one. I think there's not an argument in the world you can make that you could put Islam over John Jones just based on the body of work he's put together of, the championship run. Like John Jones is the gold standard when you're talking about combat sports across any martial art discipline.
Mm.
The Whether it be boxing, kickboxing, wrestling, judo, like John Jones can do it all. The and when Cyril first came to the UFC, man, I don't think anyone has had such a fast rise to superstardom, maybe other than maybe Conor McGregor, than Cyril Gane had. Like this dude showed up 4 years ago, and then within 2 years, and in the 4 year time that he's maybe 4 years, I think he's been in the UFC, he's had 3 title shots, main evented a sold out arena twice in Paris, France, in his home country, in the like if I'm not mistaken, he lives in Paris. So in his city, he sold out the main event in his city twice, been in starting like 2 different films, and then against the former champion, Francis Ngannou, strongest fighter in UFC history, and then also the best fighter in the world, John Jones. Those are his only 2 losses. I know some people say he's washed, but they'd be like, "Oh man, he lost to Francis and Cyril." But I think that's a lot of people who just joined the sport. But when you look at the things he's done, where he cleared out the heavyweight division, cleared every fight, right, and then you're going against Francis. You become the first interim champion for your country, like the first interim champion for France, first champion from a first, like, you know what I mean? Like the that's a crazy run to be on. Like he was kind of like, and he's a fan favorite, very charismatic. Fans love him, the media loves him, and then you get boom, John Jones in like what, your second year in the UFC, third year, maybe your eighth fight ever. You get John Jones. I think that level of nerves would get anybody. And there's also, when you have these like legendary champions like a Valentina Shevchenko, a John Jones, an Israel Adesanya, these like long running champions, the Amanda Nunes. I think sometimes the challengers can run into what I like to call the John Jones effect. Is that like, or like the Amanda Nunes effect, the Valentina Shevchenko effect? Like they're built up to be these like, there are these legends of the sport. And then you're like, oh man, they've done this. And they've probably been hearing it for the last 3 months of, they did this, right? Oh, that they've done that and they've accomplished this and that. You might be like, ah man, the nerves of it all going into that fight. I think that might have gotten the best of them in that fight. And I think you've run it back. I don't think it's just gonna be like a first round win. But yeah, it's crazy to see that, like, everything that is like happened, and bouncing back. I think that but for the Ilya thing though, right? I don't know if I don't think it's an excuse though. I think that, just me personally, I think that Ilya, like if I was Ilya, right? You have one of the craziest like championship run years, right? Like in 1 year, you knock out two of the three best featherweights of all time in one calendar year. Bro, technically I understand what people are saying, like, oh, there's more left to do. You only have one title defense. And I could get that. If you only have one title defense in 98% of scenarios, I'd be like, yeah, there's still work for you to do, right? In your division. But in one title defense, in two title fights, you knock out both Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski. The only person you didn't knock out is Jose Aldo. You knock out two of the best featherweights of all time in your first two title fights ever. If that was me, I'm be like, yeah, I think I'm going up. And, you gotta know when to like bow and kind of like move on forward, right? Like, what is there really? What else is there for you to do? Like, once you've kind of reached that level of hype and success, that's like, if I was competing, and I knock out both Robert Whitaker and Israel Adesanya in the same calendar year. What? Yo, I would be feeling myself. I would be like, let me move up and take on Alex Pereira at light heavyweight. Like, they'd be like, there's still so much to do. There's Bo Nickel and Kyle Bahio, and like, there's these guys at middleweight. I'd have been like, I don't think y'all understand. I took out two of the three best middleweights of all time in one calendar year. Let me chase greatness and go get this super fight with Alex Pereira and cement my legacy forever. But I think that when you do, I think Ilya's legacy is cemented at featherweight, and I do think that the biggest fight you can make right now is the Ilya versus Islam fight. I think he's been saying he wanted to move up to 155 for like forever now. And I think once he kind of had those two fights, he was like, hey, y'all, can I finally do the thing I wanted to do? Now that I got the belt and I've beaten two of the best to ever do it. And you vacated the belt too? If I vacate my belt to get this fight with Islam, I feel like the only thing right, I need to get that Islam fight if I'm Ilya. Because to vacate your belt just for them to say, hey, go fight the number 3 guy. What? After the year I just had, I feel like you'd be hard to convince me otherwise to like other than getting a shot to fight the champion at the next division. What are we doing here, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think when I say an excuse, I don't mean that he's like scared or anything like that, obviously, but
Oh yeah.
I just think he's kind of business focusing it, kind of. That's what I meant earlier when I referenced the kind of McGregor path. Uh, it's from his perspective, I get that it's a smart move, and it gets you to more big name fights. Like having the run that he did at 45 and now going to 55, the type of names that he has access to now, I mean, yet like even if he gets denied the Islam fight and they say, okay, take someone else that's top 5. You have Islam, Arman, Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, Max Holloway, Dan Hooker, Michael Chandler, Paddy Pimblett potentially. That's a fight that got announced. Is Michael Chandler, Paddy Pimblett? He's going to
That's a
be
fun fight.
in the mix potentially. You have Hanato Moicano. The access to star power is greatest at the top of 55 in terms of the depth of names that you have access to in that top 5, top 10. So for him and his career and the business aspect of it, it makes all the sense in the world. Go where you can match up and make big, exciting fights that draw a lot of attention. I mean, even if he loses to Islam, he can headline a ton of fight nights or be great co-mains as him versus any of the other top 5 guys, top 10 guys. There's plenty of names that if you're the UFC, you can match up with and get good viewers, good ratings, and people are going to be excited and say, "Oh, that one's on this card." So, and really, if you're the UFC, it also kind of makes a deal of sense if he's not going to want to return to 45. Because let's say Islam beats him. Okay, well, now you have Topuria, who gets what appears to be a ton of attention and could be a guy who helps you bring the UFC to Spain. And if he's not champion, you don't have to pay him pay-per-view points. So he's now a more budget-friendly option for the UFC if he's at 55 and he can't beat Islam. So for the UFC, there's a lot of points to it that make a lot of sense. And back at 45 and the fight between Volk and Lopez, either way, if you're the UFC,
It's a win-win.
Like, yeah, I mean, you got young Lopez with, the big hair and
the waterfall.
Yeah, it's dude. He speaks Portuguese. He speaks Spanish. He speaks English. It's the guy is an absolute marketing sensation. Or you go back to a legend in Volkanovski.
Fan favorite.
Yeah,
2 fan favorites actually.
It's these guys get cheered everywhere they go. So if you're the UFC, you are guaranteed the ratings that you get from the Miami card UFC 314, because everyone's tuning in to. I don't think anybody dislikes Volk, and even if you do dislike Volk, you definitely like Lopez. So
absolutely,
everybody's tuning in for that. You have the face champion coming in to be crowned. Topuria's already made it clear he's not going to return. And then you have new blood entering the division because they announced that Yair Rodriguez is going to fight Patricio Pitbull, who's coming over,
which is exciting. And hey, before we get into that one, right? I will go back for 2 seconds because that was one of the things. Remember when we talked about if you could pick another fighter to come from another organization, who would it be? Yours was Pitbull, if I remember correctly, and mine's being Stamp Fairtex. And we both said, hey, in order for either one of these fighters, for Patricio Pitbull or Stamp Fairtex to come to the UFC, something extraordinary would have to happen, and extraordinary happened. But before that, right? I will say really quick about the Ilya thing. I didn't think you were saying that he was scared. I just wanted to like clear that up.
Yeah.
I think that because I understand what you were saying, and I think all those are super valid points. I think that for like when I heard the news of like Ilya vacating the belts, some people were online were just like, oh wow, like why is he doing that? Like, oh, he has this to do and that to do. And I was like, bro, if I'm Ilya or, just watching, that I think that you got to get while the getting's good, right? Like, you beat Max, you beat Volk. I think that to like stay at 40, you could stay at 45, and that's already a guarantee, right? Like, you could boom, get pay per view points to go crazy. But if 50, you know how like Alex said, like Alex was already kind of like, hey, he's already 230 and he was cutting down to 185. And he said, hey, I'm not going to be at 185 for forever. He was like, I'm going to get this fight with Izzy. I'm going to try to win. I'm going to get this middleweight belt. And after I do this middleweight run, I'm going up to light heavyweight. And then as soon as win, lose, or draw, after that fight with Izzy the second time, he was like, bruh, I've done everything I needed to do. I've already got the middleweight belt. I'm going up to light heavyweight. I think that if you're Ilya or just looking at it right, like it's a win-win, like you said, for the UFC and Ilya and I think if you're Ilya Taporia, I think any fight other than the Islam Makhachev fight after the year he had, and he's burning all the boats to like go up to 155 now, like he's vacating the belt, giving up the pay-per-view points to go up to 155, and the only thing he's asking for is to fight Islam. I think any other fight would low-key be a slap in the face to Ilya. If they were like, hey, I know you just gave up the belt. I know you just gave up the pay-per-view points. I know you just gave up the goal of, like your featherweight belt, and you want to fight Islam. But hey, could you fight Arman Sarukian? And then we give you Islam. Like Arman Sarukian is super tough, and like will Ilya win? I think he could, like it's a close fight, but I think he could win. I think it's like a 60-40 Taporia type situation or 50-50 depending on but I don't know if you want to take that chance, right? Like you had such an amazing year. Hey, while you're chase greatness, while you can ride the lightning, boom, you go and get that championship fight, you win. Let's say you win, you beat Islam. Now you're on an even crazier level of superstardom. You lose, okay, you take another fight. Maybe you fight an Armin. Maybe you fight a Charles. Maybe you fight a Michael Chandler, right? To like rebound back. But I think you gotta the storyline's already there. Islam Makhachev and Ilya Taporia already kind of have that semi beef that they've been going back and forth. The whole Georgia Russia thing. They kind of Ilya and Islam have been going back and forth about who has better wrestling, Georgia or Russia, or like who's the better fighter between the two. You know what I mean? Like him and Merab, and then I think Islam and Umar. They were kind of going back with each other. Like I think that's both of them are good on the mic. I think that would be such a major fight, and I think that if you take a fight before Islam, I think that's kind of I think a risky path, right? Because let's say he fights Arman or fights Oliveira. He goes up to 155 and fights Charles Oliveira or Arman Sarukian, and he loses. Immediately, the Islam fight is dashed. You know what I mean? There's no way you're getting a fight with Islam now. Like you're gonna have to win 2 more fights at lightweight. Maybe even if you have a crazy knock on both of them. So that means now that super fight is pushed back a year, maybe 2 years, right? Based on performance, right?
Mm.
But if you win, now you look even more epic, right? Like you look more dope because it's like, oh man, you burned all the boats, went up to another division, took on a super tough challenge on your maiden voyage into this new division. Now the championship is definitely a lock. But you know what I mean? I feel like that's a very risky gamble, you know what I mean? So I think that, and the fight, this is just me. I think that Ilya finishes Islam Makhachev. I I think in the first round. That's
That's
it's a
bold.
hot take. Yeah, hey man, it's bold like wasabi. I'm just saying, like, when I look at when you like Islam's been a really good champion, right? Ilya, really good champion. You look at Ilya's like background. I think the biggest thing that you're gonna need if you're gonna face Islam is you're gonna need to know you're gonna have to have some strong wrestling chops to like hang with Islam Makhachev. If not, you're kind of dead in the water, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you don't have some serious wrestling chops, ooh, that's gonna be a tough night for you. And it's going to be a rough night in the office if you don't have some serious wrestling capabilities. Because, right, like, let's say you're a striker. Okay, cool. Every fight starts on the feet. But if you, let's say you rock Islam, but Islam hits you with that double leg or that blast double and takes you to the ground, how are you going to get up? Like, Islam's top control is so good and is so dangerous, right? Like, Charles Oliveira is one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners in the UFC. He has the record for most submission victories. And he is super dangerous off his back. And Islam was able to hold him there. Do you know how impressive that is? I mean, but I mean, like, for anyone who else is listening, that is so crazy. Look at Hinato Moicano. Again, super good jiu-jitsu practitioner. Good hands. Even then, Islam took him down. So I feel like Ilya is already a wrestler. Like, his background is wrestling, right? Like, he's already a super talented wrestler. And he's got knockout power for days. Like, his striking is already very, like, peak, right? And he's got the jiu-jitsu game on lock, too. He knocked out, for anyone who doesn't remember this, when he fought Max Holloway. Max Holloway's never been finished in like 24 UFC fights or whatever that crazy record was, right? Like, his entire amateur and professional career, the legend that is Max Holloway has never been knocked down, knocked out, or even really hurt for that matter. Ilya knocked him out in the first round, early second round? And
I think it was the first.
And
check.
We all know how much of a Max Holloway fan I am, and I picked Max Holloway to win that fight because I was like, yeah, Ilya's got knockout power, and he's been dusting everybody, but you can't dust the Hawaiian legend, the Waianae Warrior, Max Holloway, all the way for the win. Just like I'm gonna pick Alexa Grasso in any fight that she's in, I'm gonna pick Max Holloway for any fight that he's in. I've been a fan of Max Holloway maybe since high school. Like, since the beginning of Max's career in the UFC. And Ilya not had to be able to knock. I remember I was so hurt when he knocked out Max. I was so salty. I was in my feels.
It was round 3, by the way.
Round 3? Okay.
Yeah.
Round 3, yeah, my bad. My apologies. But
when
he did knock out Max, huh?
I didn't remember either. I just remember the moment.
Yeah, I just remember the moment because it was that shocking. I did not think that could even be a possibility. And when that happened, I was just like, I was flabbergasted. So if you have the knockout power, if you have the striking ability, the knockout power, the power in your hands to knock out the GOAT, that is the featherweight GOAT, that is one of the featherweight GOATs, that is Max Holloway, you can definitely knock out Islam Makhachev because Islam is not known for just having a crazy chin like that. You know what I mean? Alexander Volkanovski, another guy with a strong chin. He's knocked out both of them. So really, it only takes one shot for Ilya to land to like put Islam out, and he has the wrestling to negate Islam's wrestling. I think that's just gonna be a Mystic Malik pick. That if that fight happens, Ilya wins by finish in the first round. That's I'm putting it out there. That's my prediction.
I mean, here's the thing.
And the crowd goes crazy. Because I think the crowd would go insane for that to happen. And then to become a 2-division champion in 2 years.
I mean, if he does that, I think that it depends on the buildup. It depends on the buildup for sure. But if he manages to do that and he delivers on the entertainment of it and the buildup kind of catches a wave, that's the type of ingredients that get you the kind of McGregor-ness, that
absolutely
that kind of territory of transcending the sport. You still need that little extra, that little like seasoning that Conor brings that other people don't typically have. So we still need that entertainment factor, and hopefully the buildup will be less contentious than the Conor Khabib one, because I don't think we want to see a repeat of that.
Oh no.
But if he can deliver entertainment in the buildup, have that moment, and then capitalize on it with the post-fight interview, that's that type of like rocket ship that
to the moon.
That sends. And in a time where people are talking about there's a lack of superstars. Not that there is no superstars, but there's a lack of, and there's no one really transcending the sport a whole lot right now. That really could be the next like moonshot for the UFC to like bring them to the next, whatever the next level looks like. I think that's the type of thing that could happen to bring you forward without, from the sports side of it. Obviously, there's still, and I think this year is the UFC deal with ESPN comes up. So there's a lot outside of the cage that's got to get done to take the sport to a new height, a new level, and get in front of more eyeballs. But as far as in the cage, what could be the rocket fuel to give it that spark? Topuria doing that would be a massive moment that could bring the UFC into a bunch of new places.
Yeah, because I'm not gonna lie, Ilya wouldn't be over when he did that to my favorite fighter, my favorite fighter in the UFC. My favorite. If we're talking about like favorite UFC person, favorite fighter in the UFC, Max. We're talking about like a top 5. Man, Max is my favorite fighter. And when he did that to my favorite fighter, and we're talking all time, Max is still like in my top 3 favorite fighters of all time. Like, because if we're talking favorite fighters, right? My top 5 goes Max Holloway, like regardless of like gender, it goes Max Holloway, Alexa Grasso, Cyril Gane. The 4th, I would say, Israel Adesanya, and then Tatsuro Taira for like top 5 currently. And then all time, top 3 is Anderson Silva, GSP, and Max Holloway. Those are my top 3, right? Man, so to see my favorite fighter get done like that in the 3rd round, and it was a good fight. Like I really thought Max I was like, okay, Max got it, and I was like, he gonna win. And when that happened, it definitely won me over as a fan, because I was like, dang, nobody has ever done Max like that. So I was like, okay. And I saw Ilya on the come up, so I was like, oh, he's he's surging right now. He gonna be a future champion, but I don't know. Maybe after Max is done being champion. But when that happened, I said, "Oh, you won me over." But to have if let's say he does finish Islam in the first round, right?
Mm.
And like you said, that's another guaranteed superstar. That is now you are a global superstar after that, right? Even just for your legacy, to have in 2 years to say that you knocked out Alexander Volkanovski, Max Holloway, and Islam Makhachev in 2 years time, all back to back to back to back. I feel like that's the stuff that gets you put into like, oh, when we're talking about the best of a generation, that sounds like a generational run right there. That sounds like that gets you put into those conversations of like, okay, 2 division champion, knocked out this like a crazy list of names in such a short time. I think that gets you put into that, oh man, one of the best of the generation, one of the best type conversations of this generation. Like Izzy's definitely the best middleweight of his generation by far.
I mean, looking at the current, I know we have a problem with the list, but currently Islam's number 1 pound for pound on
Still
the
don't agree with
official on the UFC website anyway, and Ilya's number 4. So obviously, if he's able to do that, he's gonna move into number 1 because 45-pound champion goes up and cleans out the 55-pound champion and the current number 1 on the list as of right now. Anyway, we'll see. We know that these are massive like recency bias. If it ends up being that the Aspinall and John Jones fight goes off and John Jones wins, I think you'll see John Jones restored to number 1. We've seen these rankings are very
order
elastic.
will be restored back to the rankings because we all know John Jones is the pound for pound best fighter in the world. Like as much as I like Ilya, if they put Ilya over John Jones, I feel like I would still be like, come on, guys, what are we doing here? Like, because I think as long as John Jones is active, to put anybody over John Jones is crazy work to me. Like, I think that's such insane work to put.
Well,
like,
it'd be different if there was like a John Jones drop off, like if he looked significantly worse than he had in the past.
Exactly.
I think we could all say, oh, okay, like he's not who he was, or if there was such a large amount of not fighting that you said, well, we can't keep him on there. It's been years and years. If you want to say, oh, Stipe doesn't qualify for when he was still an active UFC, not retired. If you would say, oh, Stipe's not active enough to currently be ranked in the rankings or in the pound for pound rankings, I think we could all accept that. He hadn't fought in multiple years. But to not have a recent performance where you could say, oh, he definitely fell off, he definitely looks worse. It's to just bump him down for really nothing when a guy is still, even if you can make an argument that he's not at the peak of his powers anymore, you don't really have evidence for it. You can't point to anything. There's nothing you could show me in the last few John Jones performances where you go, oh, that right there, he's slowing down. Like, if anything, you could argue he looks better.
That's the craziest part. Because John Jones is I feel like a once in a lifetime type fighter, right? Like to your point, there's been if there was, that's so crazy. He's so like good that you have to come up with hypotheticals of like, what if he wasn't as good as he is?
Yeah.
To even like make it make sense in like how someone would get put over him. That's how insanely good he is as far as hand-to-hand combat goes. When it comes to combat sports, you have to for any other fighter, you could say, oh man, well, this person could win maybe off this, or maybe this person get ranked over that if this fight goes well. John Jones is is so goated that like you have to be like, well, maybe if he was gone for 5 years, that you could then at that point you could say, oh man, this guy would technically put over him because he has been gone for like half a decade, or like, oh, maybe if he like lost 5 fights in a row, then you could say, oh, maybe he, this guy is, you have to come up with you have to do such crazy mental gymnastics to even be like, oh man, because I think when you have a accolade list like John Jones has, right? Youngest UFC champion ever, one of 9 or one of 10 double champions in the last 30 years. In the 30-year history of the UFC, one of 10 fighters ever to become double champion, a 2 division champion, has beaten like 10 like 10 or 12 former champions, Hall of Famers. Uh, the list goes on, right? And people was like, has never lost a fight in 24 pro fights, like, you know what I mean? Or 26 pro fights or something crazy like that. Like, this man has been undefeated for the better part of almost 2 decades. Like, yeah, like for the almost 2 decades, like for 16 years of dominance. He has not lost a fight in like 16 years or something crazy like that, right? Like, youngest champion ever, oldest champion on the roster right now. And then, when people was like, oh man, we're technically going to put Islam because, John Jones hasn't fought in like 2-3 years. He goes, bet, say less. Comes out of like, comes back into fighting after 3 years away. And we've all seen this, like when a fighter takes 2-3 years off the sport, usually when they come back, they're never the same as they were at the peak of their powers. John Jones comes back after 3 years of inactivity and finishes the person that a lot of people thought was the future of the heavyweight division in the first round. He took on the Pride of Paris. Remember, during that time, everyone was like, Cyril is the future of the heavyweight division. He's the future of the face of the UFC. Oh, he's going to be champion. He's this and that.
In the build-up, everybody was saying that this was going to be the all-time classic because,
yeah,
you have John and his wrestling versus Cyril and his kickboxing, and how is John going to get his hands on Cyril? And like the whole okay, we're going to go 5 rounds. It's going to be a super entertaining 25 minutes. And if John Jones is still John Jones, he'll just find some way to just do enough to get the decision. And instead, he just ran through him in the first round.
Yeah, and remember they went through that crazy record, that stat in the beginning saying like, oh yeah, for fighters above 36 or 35 going into a championship fight against the younger like opposition, the record is like the chances that the older fighter beats the younger fighter is like the record was like 5-42. There's like they were like, oh yeah, 80% of the time or 70%, whatever that crazy record stat was. It was like 5 times out of like 80 has the older fighter over 36 or 35 beaten the younger opposition. And then John Jones came in and we thought it was going to be like and a lot of times I think they were like, oh, this is peak. This is in the lead up. Everyone was like, this is peak MMA, peak heavyweight combat when you have I guess the new superstar, fan favorite, media darling, phenomenal kickboxing, phenomenal footwork, cardio, this and that. This is as like the peak, like Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, hypothetical. Like this is John Jones, Alexander Gustafsson, like classic type thing. And a lot of people were split 50-50. They were like, oh, it's time for the new guard. Oh, the old guard still got it. John Jones came in and easily dispatched the guy people were saying was supposed to be the future. I still think Cyril Gane is the future of the heavyweight division. I think he, like, after John Jones retires, I think he will be champion. I think that's just me. I think he's still one of the best heavyweights in the UFC. I think he's going to be a future champion still. But he ran through Cyril in the first round. And then in that next fight, spinning back kicked Stipe, the greatest heavyweight in UFC history, into retirement. Like, everyone, again, thought that was, they were like, oh, GOAT versus GOAT. The greatest heavyweight of all time versus the greatest light heavyweight of all time. Oh, this is going to be a one for the ages. This is going to be a fight of
Well,
fights.
and even people who were saying that John was going to win, that Stipe was too much time off or too old or whatever. Nobody that I saw thought, "Oh, John's gonna finish him." Or if they did think that, they thought, "Oh, it'll be an accumulation of things." It's nobody said, "Oh, John's gonna come up and display a technique that he's never really used before, and he's gonna use it so effectively that he's gonna finish Stipe to the body." Like,
And wasn't it
no
in like
one
the
thought
first
that at
round?
all. I'd have to check. We might have seen the second or the third. I got to check now because I really thought the Holloway versus Taporia, I really thought that was the first round because it was the beginning of the third. So I thought it just
Mhm.
came out and happened like that. So I gotta check before I just say.
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate you doing our fact checking. But yeah, like you said, everyone who thought,
Yeah, that
like,
was
even if
also
you
the third.
third, okay, our apologies again. Hey, hey, this is all feelings, no facts. But we mix it in the facts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Vibe with us. But like you said, everyone who thought there was gonna be a finish thought it was gonna be later in the championship rounds. No one thought like, oh, John Jones is just gonna come in there. Remember, John Jones sweep Stipe off his feet in the bit, like the first round. He swept them off his feet and like slam it. And nobody thought he was gonna like judo like trip Stipe and sweep him off his feet and just pound him with all those elbows and all those strikes. And then when he came with that spinning back kick, so you beat the future of the heavyweight division in your maiden voyage into heavyweight. You finish the future of the heavyweight division in dominant fashion, and then in your next fight, you finished the greatest heavyweight in that division's history in dynamic fashion. Like, it's yeah, like it's wild business that, like, now it's like, how do you not put that guy in like first in the pound for pound ranking after 16 years of being of dominance and 16 years of being undefeated and going against the best? Because John Jones's run it wasn't like he was in an era of nobody, like of like minimal competition. You know what I think it is too? John Jones came up in the most dangerous era, I feel like, of like light heavyweights. He was fighting a prime Shogun, a prime Machida, because remember, Machida looked phenomenal. Machida was that guy during his prime and during leading up to that fight. And I felt like Machida was putting in work in that fight. And then John Jones switched up the game plan on Machida midway into that fight. Like, oh, you getting the upper hand? Nah. Yeet. And we got that crazy standing guillotine that like runs in all of John Jones's highlights now, because that was one of the craziest finishes ever. But he fought a prime Machida, a prime Shogun, a prime Rampage, a prime Rashad Evans. Like, he's beaten all these guys in their prime. Like, oh man, yeah, the run this dude's been on. But going into I think this Ilya thing, man, that's gonna be crazy. But then going in from that to the leading into like what I guess the after effects of Ilya moving up, the hole that left in the division kind of was like the perfect storm for Diego Lopez, because Diego Lopez, fan favorite, very charismatic guy. Like, he comes in straight out of a rocket. He's there to put on a show. He's got the no regrets going on. You know what I mean? On the like, that is what is like, dream it, believe it, then make it happen. yo, he did exactly what his tattoo says. He dreamed it and said, I'm gonna be fighting for the belt. I'm gonna become a UFC champion. He believed it, took on all comers, never said no, said yes on short notice, on a day's notice, on a week's notice, took on a fight at 2 weight classes above him, took on a fight like he's never said no to a fight. He's fought in fights in his division, took on short notice fights on his division, went up to fought at 165. I think that was against the Dan Ige fight. That was the Dan Ige fight. And then made it happen. And now he's fighting for the belt. Within 2 years? Against one of the best featherweights that division has ever seen. Like, if we're talking about the Mount Rushmore of featherweights, it's Jose Aldo, Max Holloway, Alexander Volkanovski, and Connor. But those are the top four. But I think that how we were saying that
Topuria.
Oh yeah, actually, we're gonna switch. I think I will switch out Topuria with I'll switch out Connor with Topuria because because Mount Rushmore only has four on it, right? It's just 4 presidents. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, I just had to double check. But yeah, if we're talking revision update, I think the Mount Rushmore of featherweight would be, I think most people would agree with it, at least for me, and is Jose Aldo, Max Holloway, Alexander Volkanovski, and Ilia Topuria. Because I feel like the reason you get that spot is if you knock out both the second and third best featherweight, now I don't know where to rank the Volk, Holloway, and Jose Aldo. I don't know who would be 1, 2, 3, but if you knock out 2 of the 3 on that Mount Rushmore,
I think as far as how they're all going to stack up against each other, I think we won't really know until Volk and Max, and amazingly somehow Aldo's still going. So until all of them are retired, I think it'll be difficult to kind of measure them and see. I think it's one of those where you got to have their whole resume, and then you got to watch their prime fights some more and see okay, who had what skills and how would that work and what did they do and who was creative and who had that fear factor and what were they doing when they were on top, how long were they on top, were they able to regain that, the kind of match up prime for prime and how the resumes kind of stack up. I think we'll know more when they're all done, because somehow they're all still going.
Yeah, and I feel like what also makes it so hard is that they're all it's hard to do that conversation, like you said, until they all retire, because it's all so close. If you say Jose Aldo, Max Holloway, Volkanovski, it's hard to put the 3 together and be 1, 2, 3 definitively. It's kind of well, there's this and then there's that and there's, you know what I mean? When you look at middleweight, I think Anderson Silva is the consensus best middleweight of all time. I think any fan of MMA would agree with that statement. The run he was on, the accomplishments, the accolades, he has records that still haven't been beat at middleweight, and he's been retired for what, 5 years now, 6 years. He's done things in this sport that hasn't been touched to this point, right? When you talk about the greatest welterweight of all time, bar none, that is George St. Pierre. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The record, the accomplishments, the accolades, they still haven't been touched in George St. Pierre stopped fighting like 2016, 2018, 20. And so, but with the featherweight, I think it's so close. Like they're all so like top tier. And then but yeah, I think that's a hard one to do. But yeah, I think Ilya gets that one for that one. But for Diego Lopez, like dream it, believe it, make it happen. He's done all those things up to this point. He has great striking. He has very good jujitsu, like some really nice jujitsu, and he has good wrestling. You know, I feel like, and he trains at the famous Lobo gym. I think we've said before, I'm a fan of all of the Team Lobo fighters. And they put out some stars. You know what I mean? Like, I think that it's hard for me to, you can't not train at Team Lobo and not have some top tier boxing abilities, some top tier striking. You know what I mean? When you have Alexa Grasso, Diego Lopez, Lupi Godinez, like all of them have really good striking, some top tier striking, and they got that wrestling. You know what I mean? So they got that grappler. So I'd be like, if nothing else, you're gonna get some top tier striking. But all three of those are like stars, in my opinion, and all future champions. I mean, like, and former champions and future champions again. So I think that, and then when you have Volk's run was phenomenal. I think a lot of people, I think of all the champions, I think Volk's run as featherweight champion was really underappreciated, in my opinion. I think that what he did as featherweight champion, I think it was underrated, underappreciated / underrated, because I think that at least in my opinion, I don't think he got I think for longtime fans of the sport, we understand what Volk did and what he has done for the sport. And even that, you know, and then I think even some of the long time, I feel like a lot of us, like people I've talked to, when you're like, now when you look on it, people be like, oh yeah, Volk's like one of the best. He's a fan favorite. Like he has the cooking channel. He's put on epic fights. He's definitely one of the best featherweights there's ever been. But when I think like during his like run as champion, I think he was kind of like, I think that run was underrated or underappreciated, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, definitely on his way up with his style of not talking trash, kind of just being himself, kind of prove it with the action type of style. It's going to be a little bit tough to get your respect on the front end of your career. I think the respect more comes on the back end once you've accomplished everything. And so, I mean, the run he had from 2018 all the way through, uh, finished Chad Mendez, beat Aldo, beat Holloway, beat Holloway again, beat Ortega, uh, beat Korean Zombie, beat Holloway again, go up, chase 55, have a laser thin decision loss to Islam, come
And
back
I
down
thought
to
Volk
Europe.
won that fight.
Yeah, and then come back down, finish Yair Rodriguez, who people were saying, oh, this is the most dangerous striker in the division. So, and you come out and finish him. Then you try one more time back up there at 55, have the head kick lost to Islam, and then you come back only, let's see, what was that? Like 4 months later, and you get KO'd again. I think that the run he was on, the names on the list are great. I think we'll see if he's fully recovered and he's back to the kind of prime Volk. I think the loud question will be, how much of a mistake was it to come back so soon off that KO loss to Islam and jump back in there with Taporia? Because if he looks like his old self again, you would say, man, what if you just waited another like 3 months, or you took, because we see guys who are at a high level who get KO'd, and they really like take time off and they make sure that their brain is as recovered as it's gonna be, and they go do all these therapies and these rehabs and these treatments, and then they come back. Whereas Volk said at the time, I don't like to be inactive. It kind of plays with my head a little bit if I don't have something coming up to stay focused on in the gym. And so he chose to turn it around real quick. So if he's back to it, you always have that question, but I think he's also the type of spirit who doesn't believe in that. Volk kind of seems one of those take it as it comes kind of guys. That's, hey, that was my choice. I did it how I wanted to do it. Didn't go my way, but we keep on trucking type of guys. That's the impression that I get. So, and it'll be interesting to see kind of in this conversation that we've had about uh, Tatiana Suarez, Khamzat Chimaev, and in this one, Diego Lopez, these fighters that are known for bringing a storm and overwhelming their opponents. How is that going to translate against Volk? So what Volk shows up, and then can he weather that storm? Because Diego Lopez brings a real big storm, and
Oh yeah, he brings a Category 5 storm
yeah, and
from
he's not
round one.
similar to Tatiana and Hamzat. He's not small for his weight class, so
No,
he's bringing a lot of pressure, a lot of physicality early, and we'll see. Volk's definitely going to get tested as far as how recovered he is, or if maybe if this one were to go the wrong way, I think we'd start to see a kind of narrative develop that Volk can't handle that top end storm. That maybe he's past it. So this will be a big test for him to see: am I still that guy? Do I still have it? Can I weather the storm, or am I kind of on the back end of my career? And for Diego, such a huge opportunity to be. It's looking at it and to say, you had your setbacks kind of earlier in your career, but the run you're on in the UFC since your debut loss to Evalev, it's since then you're on an absolute streak. You get the 3 finishes back to back to back. You beat Dan Ige on short notice. You beat Brian Ortega, and now you're here. So 5-round atmosphere for the first time. What does that look like? How does he respond? It's a lot of questions to be answered. And at 30 years old, if you can make the breakthrough, there's definitely still challenges left and guys who you want to see him matched up with, but he has the makings of a kind of guy who you
could be
might
champ for a
be.
while.
Yeah, we could be a passing of the torch at 45 from and fitting, considering we haven't heard Diego talk about 55 yet. So if he's going to stick around 45, it could be fitting to have Volk do the matchup to be, hey, I have the baton as the kind of holder of the crown, the next king in the lineage of featherweight, and now I pass it on to you, Diego Lopez. So that one's going to be tense.
Oh yeah, because I do agree. I think there's so many questions on both sides. It's like Diego has looked phenomenal up until this point, right? Uh, I think one of the questions that it is like, how does, like you said, how does he look like in a 5-round environment? How does he deal with that championship experience that Volk has of being on the top and having those names? Like you said, all those names you said are top tier names. Zombie, T City, Holloway, 3 times, which is crazy because literally outside of Volk and Islam, Holloway does not lose. He's turned away multiple people and has worked a lot of people. You know what I mean? So when you look at Chad Mendes, you look at all these names and people he's beat. The like that guillotine Brian Ortega had him in. I think anybody else, if T City was fighting anybody else, he would have been champion that night. That because that was such a tight guillotine, like a top guillotine too. And like I think Volk said also he was like, oh man, that was super tight. Like I think anybody else. So Volk has the tenacity and the toughness to like weather some pretty heavy storms, but we'll see how because I like Whaley versus Tatiana Suarez. Everybody was very amped about Tatiana Suarez and the storm she brings to people, the pressure she brings to people, the fight she brings to people. Can Whaley do it? Can she weather the storm? Can Tatiana weather the storm that is Whaley? You know what I mean? And we kind of saw Whaley was like, y'all must have forgot who I am. Whaley was like, bro, I'm the second best. I'm the second best. I'm the number 2 pound for pound women's fighter, female fighter in the world. Y'all put some respect on my name. Y'all must have forgot how great I am, and really put on a masterclass performance against Tatiana Suarez. And I don't know if we'll be able, if it's like, if it will see the same in this bulk fight of like, put on a y'all must have forgot kind of performance that like, hey, I'm not one of the best featherweights for no reason. And I do think, this is just my personal opinion, I do think Volk came back a little too early to fight Topuria. Mm-hmm. And I think that now that he's fully healed up, I think we'll see a much more, because even then, like I think that we'll see a return to form for Volkanovski now that he's like healed up, he's recovered. This is his chance to regain his belt. I think that we see a very different Volkanovski than we have seen in the last 2 fights, right? So it's like, how is Diego going to respond to that? Because if you beat Volkanovski, the mountain that is Volkanovski, I don't see who you lose to after that. Like, you're going to be, I feel like it's like one of those things where, how they say, you become 13% better once you become champion. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, after you beat Volkanovski, in order to beat him, you have to elevate your game so much just to even compete with him, that if you can overcome that adversity, now you're going to be on such a, like, your game is going to be on such another level just because you had to elevate it so high just to compete at that level, that if you can succeed at that level, you're looking at potentially a long time running champion, because it's like, oh, you beat Volkanovski. Who else is there really to kind of, you would get the benefit of the doubt from, I think, the MMA community that you would win in your next bout against whoever that is, right? But for Volkanovski, I think that the question is, can you weather the storm that is Diego Lopez? Because he comes out hot and heavy in that first round, where he's coming and putting on, getting the show started right, getting the show started early. He's coming at you guns blazing 0 to 1,000, burning out the tires and everything. Yeah, and then it's because if he wins, people go, oh man, Volk's this, he's that, you know what I mean? He's that guy. But if he loses, I do think people start to, like you said, start that narrative of like, oh, is he a little past the prime? How is he this? Is he that? Maybe he came back too early. Is this the decline, wherever it is? Yeah. But yeah.
For a guy like Volk, I would really hope that if this one doesn't go his way and he's not performing to the level he wants, I would hope that he wouldn't stick around as a gatekeeper, because I still think that even if he loses this, he could stick around and be kind of a little bit what Jared Cannonier is right now at middleweight, where Jared Cannonier is 40 years old. He looks phenomenal. He doesn't look 40. He looks so good.
Absolutely.
But the problem I have if I'm in Jared Cannonier's camp, and what I would ask him is well, okay, why are we doing this? Because if it's to be a world champ, well, okay, you just won a really important, significant fight, so we could continue on this run, but let's keep it pointed in that direction. But if it's just to kind of hang around and be kind of a UFC fighter, as an older guy, like once you get past 35, I don't think there's value in that anymore because of how much you got to give away to still say that. So, especially if you've had a long run in the UFC, you've been champion as Volk, you have people invested in your personality. Like,
A great YouTube channel.
yeah, it's you can pivot away if this doesn't go your way. It's you can do other things and not take sort of the young eat the old in this sport. So it's eventually some young guns coming and they're gonna take you out. So it's better to kind of slide out of the way before that oncoming fist comes running through and clocks you, rather than stick in and try and stay too long once you're not the level that you can be or that you were. So because
Yeah,
I did want to talk about it a little bit because it was significant, and I really like Jared Cannonier. He's super like relatable and likable, and definitely of of the UFC fighters that you're going to hear, Jared Cannonier might be the most considerate and humble of the guys that you're going to hear. I think there's guys who are as considerate and humble and as well thought out as him, but maybe none that are more well thought out than him. When you hear how he's definitely thought through everything in his life and how it relates to his career and the UFC and martial arts. And I think part of that is contributing to his longevity, but also at the same time, I want I want guys like Cannonier and Volk, if they're not going to be title contenders, I want them to value themselves and their body. Like when Dominic Cruz retired recently, and he said, "Well, it's either going to be like I could fight and I might lose my arm, or I could retire and I could keep functionality. So I'm going to retire because it's not worth my arm." I just want guys to make more of that type of choice because as much as like Zabit, we all wanted to see more Zabit. We still want to see more Zabit. Uh, if he's happier and has a better, longer life, choosing to be a doctor instead of being an extremely entertaining UFC fighter, I'm glad that he made that choice for him. I don't I don't like to see guys stick around too long where it starts to feel gross. When definitely the last like Tony Ferguson fight, it starts to feel like you're doing something wrong almost when you're watching it. It's there comes a point where you see a guy who's holding on like BJ Penn at the end where you go like I shouldn't be watching this and this shouldn't be happening. Like this feels like if I was at this party, I'd leave this party right now and go home because this is a bad scene.
yeah. It's always sad when you get to when you see like kind of legends or like really like fan favorites legends that kind of like when you see fighters kind of overstay their stay in the sport, like overstay in the sport where like prime Tony Ferguson. I remember everyone was very hype. I was like, oh man, Tony Ferguson, hey, you know what I mean? Like when he was El Kakui, it was a good time, when you were watching him fight. But then I remember one loss became two losses became four losses became seven, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and it's just like I think the fan a lot of the fans wanted a return. Like I think we all kept on showing back up to these fights in hopes of like a return to form for like where like, oh man, this is the one where he gets the one last win and he can like ride off into the sunset, you know what I mean, and being like, hey, appreciate y'all, it's been a great career, right? Like, but sometimes I feel like in our sport, there's not a whole lot of happy like endings, you know what I mean? Like a lot of riding off into the sunsets. You don't get that super often. So like again, BJ Penn was, I think his run was phenomenal. Like I feel like he was like ahead of his time. You know what I mean? I think like he was just a phenomenal fighter. I just was just really great fighter, right? Like I remember being like, I feel like a lot of people like saw him when he was on in his prime, being like, oh man, BJ Penn, right? And then kind of towards the end, that like kind of similar Tony Ferguson situation, where you're kind of like, or you'll see like Chuck Liddell during his last kind of like, I think the last couple of fights where you're just like, or you know what I mean? Like I think that whenever you see, I think I'm sure there's more, but that's just, I think those are the top three that kind of like stick out the most. When you see fighters kind of, they're chasing that one last win, right? And that one always can be tough to be like, oh man, let me just get this one last one. But I think that for the Cannonier, I thought he looked good in the fight.
Yeah.
I like the first round was a little dicey, like against RoboCop, and where it looked like RoboCop, almost got him out of there first round, and then he rallied back. And I think, because I think sometimes you'll see Cannonier here, he's like very patient in the cage, where he's kind of like getting the shots off, doing what he needs to do to get the finish and whatever. And I think we kind of saw him go like, you know what, tossing the playbook into the wind. No more being patient. I'm gonna get after this guy, and I'm gonna get him up out of here. So, and because I think some people were calling him a gatekeeper and saying this and that, and then he was like, you know what, tossing the playbook out of there. I'm gonna get him. And when he got him out of there, I was like, hey, because RoboCop is still like a really good fighter. He's very like very game. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
game.
I mean,
Like,
I think this type of loss is the one where it's A, understandable, and B, totally able to recover from, because it's not like he took a ton of damage. It's what really happened is he saw an opportunity to get Jared out of there, but he wasn't able, Jared was able to be defensively responsible enough and had a good enough base of training that he was able to recover and not get finished. But you understand why RoboCop, especially in the Apex, when you got somebody hurt and you're the headline of the Apex, and you're thinking, okay, well, I don't want to be in the Apex anymore. I'm going to show them that I'm a crowd fighter. I'm going to be at the events. So I got this guy hurt. I'm going to close the show, and then this is going to be my last go of it, the Apex. I'm going to be back in front of the people. And then a guy who's as veteran savvy as Jared and as well trained and in as good a shape as Jared goes, okay, well, I'm not going to let you finish me. I'm going to be smart. I'm going to use all my tricks of the trade. I'm going to use all of my experience. I'm going to survive this round, get into my corner, kind of USA over there, bring it back down, reset, and we're going to come back and start this fight over mentally, and we're going to go from there. And then RoboCop was like, "Oh man, I really thought this was about to be over, and now here comes 20 minutes of Jared Cannonier right back at you, looking as in shape and as good as when he was on that run initially, when he was headed up and had the fight against Izzy. That was the kind of Jared Cannonier that we saw. A little bit more. Uh, I feel like on that run he might have had a few more finishes, but in terms of the style that he fought with and the forward pressure and the overwhelming, that's who Jared was, and that's what he showed in his last fight. So he's definitely not over it, but I will say if you do these rematches and they don't go the way, I think that it's fine to continue in martial arts and not be a UFC fighter anymore, to find different avenues and different paths to find a way to be involved in the sport in some way or in martial arts in some way. But being careful about when that exit is, because, 1, 2, 3, like around the third one, you go, like, are we in trouble here? But then sometimes you see guys recover from that and bring it on. But also sometimes you can maybe stop yourself before that if you get the feeling that it's not the same.
Yeah, and you see him rally back, and it was, I think that. Side note,
Mhm.
is it totally unrelated, kind of related?
Mhm.
Is it me, or I didn't know RoboCop was like 32. He's got like young old face.
Yeah,
Like
he's
I
definitely
didn't
got the like wrinkly kind of. I don't know if it's like a, because
I
I
thought he
don't
was
know
like
what his
30.
background is.
I thought he was like 43. I thought he was like in that, like I thought he was like 40 in the like kind of like that range, and I didn't realize until like someone mentioned that like he's still a very young fighter. So it's like,
Okay, so yeah, he just turned 33 last week. So, and
yeah,
he's been fighting. His first professional MMA fight was 2014. So, yeah, he's like in his prime, or rather
yeah.
entering it right now.
So I think that also very impressive. I mean, RoboCop is a good fighter. I think he'll. I think he has. Um, like I don't think this is gonna like hinder him all that much. I think that Jared Cannonier is still is good fighter. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I think he's
Jared's still
really good. Yeah,
firmly a
he's still
top 10 guy.
firmly in the top of the middleweights, in my
Yeah.
opinion. Right? Like I feel like when you beat someone like RoboCop, I think it definitely helps your progression forward. Um, but I think that another unrelated kind of related thing is it's so impressive. Jared Cannonier's like journey of like like was a heavyweight, then he became a light heavyweight, and then now fighting at middleweight. Super impressive. The
Yeah. Well, also the leap in skill set, because I do remember him as, when he was a heavyweight, he was definitely more of like a stand and bang kind of heavyweight movement forward pressure guy. But as he's kind of gained more discipline in the weight and all that, you could definitely see it in his fight style too, that he's more technical, more disciplined. He's still a guy who's showing really high level stuff. And I mean, he's been fighting at a high level against. I mean, first professional fight was 2011. He got in the UFC in 2015, and I mean, he's fought Glover, he's fought Blachowicz, he's fought Reyes, uh, he's fought Anderson Silva. That was Anderson's last fight, I think. No, Anderson's last fight was Uriah Hall. But he's fought Anderson, he's fought Whitaker, Gastelum, Brunson, Izzy, Strickland, Vittori, Imovov, Kayo, and now RoboCop. So he's definitely had a storied career. He might not end up on like all time lists, but his martial arts journey has brought him against some of the biggest names in the sport. So he's really like he's really got a lot out of his MMA journey, and to kind of be going still at 40 and showing the level. It's again, I think he's still firmly in it. We're just gonna have to see. So right now he's ranked. Let's see, where's Jared? Number 7. So I think that's probably about where he is right now. I mean, ahead of him is Kaio, Whitaker, Izzy, Hamzat, Strickland, Imavov, and Drickus.
Tough
So
lineup.
yeah, and kind of the problem for Jared is he's lost to most of the guys ahead of him. So that's where I would start to say like, hey, you just won your last one. Let's see if you can get one of these rematches in front of you and kind of, you know, get some progression towards maybe having your own kind of Glover Teixeira run at the end here. But I would also say if you feel a drop off or you feel like you can't be champion, sticking around as a 40 plus guy around the number 7 range in your weight class is super impressive and an accomplishment for sure. But also not a good long term plan as far as how you're going to move forward with your health or your career at that point. So I would like to see Jared get someone ahead of him, whether that's who would be interesting. I don't think anyone's going to sanction him versus Izzy again. I just think the way that was
Yeah,
so bad last time, we're not going to see that one again.
yeah. I think he said he wanted the rematch with Whitaker.
Okay, that could be
That's what.
interesting.
Yeah, I remember him like he's been saying that like since he had lost the first one, he thinks that like enough time has passed, get that rematch against Whitaker and see because I think a win there would be big for him.
Mm.
But the switching gears,
Mm.
Michael Chandler, one of the other fights that were announced, one of the big news stories was Michael Chandler, Paddy Pimblett. What are your feelings on this?
Well, first, good for Mike for getting a fight finally. The Conor McGregor waiting around thing after the Ultimate Fighter did not work out, unfortunately. But good for Mike for having a fight. Good for Paddy for getting an opportunity against one of the biggest names in the division. Uh, I have concerns about this fight. Mainly, like, I don't know that Michael Chandler is going to fight this smart enough to win this fight. I think he has the skills to beat Paddy for sure. But this also kind of feels like if you were a conspiracy person and you were like the UFC's propping up Paddy and they're shielding him away from the good matchups or the matchups that are harder for him. I definitely could see how someone could make that argument because I don't expect Mike to wrestle at all. I expect him to go out there and try and land a huge knockout in the first round. And as much as that's a possibility for sure, I think Paddy will also have an advantage in a lot of the, let's say, the situations where the fight's going to end up because I think Mike overextends himself and I think there'll be opportunities for Paddy to win. I guess the only thing that gives me kind of pause about this fight is if Charles didn't submit Michael Chandler, then perhaps Paddy can't either. And
That's
so
fair. That's a fair assessment.
maybe with it being 3 rounds instead of 5, that's a little bit more Mike kind of pacing because he does gas out a lot of times, going way too hard early on. Um, I think it's kind of a pick 'em because normally you match these guys up against other elite guys. I take the other elite guys way, like, in a second, because I think Patty and Michael Chandler are both kind of beautifully flawed prospects. It's Mike's too in love with this style that he's set out for himself, that he's fought his whole career with for some reason, even though he has other skills to use. And Patty, I think, is a little bit more limited for sure, but he has enough to beat kind of lower down guys and guys who will give him a path to victory. So it's definitely a pick 'em in my head. I mean, I think when you look at all the guys, I think there's a reason that he's not fighting the other guys who are ranked at 55. I mean, like BSD, Grant Dawson, Jalen Turner, who are all ranked under him currently. Guys who are ranked in front of him: Fazeev, Moicano, Dariush, Gamrot. I and then the guys other than Chandler who are also ranked in front of him: Hooker, Holloway, Poirier, Gaethje, Oliveira, Saryukin. I think that if you were picking a guy and you said, "Hey, who's the best guy ranked in front of Patty that he has a chance against?" It'd be Mike. So I think he definitely has a chance. And I'm trying to. What was Patty's last fight? How did he end up ranked?
Bobby Green.
Bobby Green. That was it.
Mm-hmm. I think that was a submission win. Let me double check.
So yeah, his last 3 fights are the Jared Gordon decision where he didn't win, but he got the nod. The Tony Ferguson fight, which shouldn't have happened, but Tony agreed, so that's how it goes. And then, submitted Bobby Green. I don't think Mike's getting submitted. So I think we're going to see all 3 rounds. In that case, I'll lean Mike because of the 3-round stipulation, but I don't love the fight, as you can tell, from a sporting kind of way. I think it'll be fun, but it's not what I would put together.
I think I favor Michael Chandler in this one too, just because of I do think it's a kind of a pick'em, right? Where I'm trying to look at the advantages for both fighters and like the path to victory, right? Like Michael Chandler obviously has the strength advantage over Patty by a lot, right? Like if you look at Michael Chandler and you look at Patty Pimblett, it almost looks like you can obviously tell there is a sizable strength advantage for Chandler, right? However, if it goes to, I almost want to say, if it goes to the ground, Patty has the advantage, right? But Michael Chandler is a very talented wrestler, though he never uses it. So I think when it came to grappling, I was thinking like, oh yeah, this, but then I was like, oh, Michael Chandler has serious and very impressive wrestling credentials, but he just never uses it. So it almost makes you be like, oh yeah, maybe the grappling, but then it's like, oh well, Michael Chandler can grapple and he can wrestle, but he just prefers to make it exciting for the fans and go into these like striking battles with everybody.
Yeah. And his jiu-jitsu defense is definitely really top level. Otherwise, Charles would have submitted him.
Exactly. Like, so when I look at Patty has good submissions, right? Like you submitted. I remember everyone was saying King Green is the biggest challenge for him up to date, right? And it was, and he definitely surprised me because I had King Green winning. And when he submitted him, right? And like you were saying, Charles Oliveira, the best submission artist in that division, couldn't submit Michael Chandler. So it kind of gives me some pause to be like, will he, if Charles Oliveira, the best submission artist, best jiu-jitsu practitioner in the UFC, couldn't submit Michael Chandler, the chances of Patty submitting Michael Chandler, I don't like those chances. Maybe he pulls it off. Maybe he's like, oh man, maybe he gets rocked and swept off his feet. Maybe he gets knocked on his butt wherever and goes for a triangle and somehow gets it. I'll be very surprised. I think maybe with being the smaller, potentially quicker fighter, I think you have to be more. He'll have to be very agile and maybe just kind of like point fight his way to a decision if they keep it on the feet. Because I don't see how Patty knocks out Michael Chandler just because of the. Huh?
It's impossible. He won't.
Yeah, because the size differential between both fighters, Michael Chandler is significantly bigger and stronger than Patty.
Well, and also, Patty's never shown himself to be the type of clean striker that could knock out someone like Mike gets knocked out by guys like Poirier or Charles Oliveira or Justin Gaethje, like guys who are known for really, really good technique where they see opportunities and they place their shots really well. It's Patty's never shown that level of striking, especially not with the hands, which is where you would be able to get Chandler. I think Chandler's kind of like build doesn't lend itself to getting head kicked just because he's so like thick and kind of like stout that he's usually able to like duck under or raise an arm, and he's kind of like into you with that forward pressure style anyway. So he's not really, the guys that back up or try and maintain the space are guys who you can get with the kicks, but guys who are on that forward pressure gas all the time, you're probably not going to find them with a head kick. You're maybe looking a knee up the middle, but Mike's not going to shoot. So you're probably not getting to his chin unless you can grab him and get to like a clinch situation.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, that's because again, Michael Chandler, the bigger fighter, the stronger fighter, the fighter with crazy knockout power in his hands against Patty, who's not necessarily, like you said, hasn't shown himself to be like this like super clean sniper, like of a striker who could just like all he needs is one shot in the right place, time, place. You know what I mean? So I think he will have to like really utilize his like footwork and like agility to kind of like point fight his way to a decision. I feel like that's like the biggest road to victory that I can think for him outside of a submission, which I feel like a decision win is the most likely outcome. A submission is like unlikely, but maybe the second best option, where I do feel like a TKO KO finish would be almost impossible for his like fight style and like stature and size, because he's never shown himself to be like, oh man, I just got like crazy knockout power. And I think to stop Michael Chandler, you're gonna have to knock him out.
Yeah, you got to have that power of those top guys who have already beat him.
Yeah,
they can stop him rushing in so much because they can get his respect. It's if you can't get Mike's respect, he'll just charge on through you.
He'll just just run like bull rush his way through you. And so I think that because when they announced the fight, right? And I was trying to think of like, okay, the X's and the O's of trying to feel like, okay, who would win this fight? The only thing I kept on thinking about is that crazy punt kick that Michael Chandler had against Tony Ferguson when he like punt kicked him and had the crowd going crazy, and he did those 3 backflips afterwards. Yeah. Man, he could have kicked that mouthpiece into the nosebleeds. Like, man, he could have been an NFL kicker with that level of punt kick that he did. That crazy front kick he did. That front kick was NFL kicker worthy. And I think if that happened during that fight, it would be another highlight reel. So I think I'm leaning towards Michael Chandler by like KO.
Yeah.
Maybe first, second round.
Yeah,
But
that's kind of where I'm at. I just don't see how he's going to get Mike's respect and be able to back him off.
yeah,
And I was rewatching the clip. The way that he got into the grappling with King Green was uh, he landed a leg kick, and King Green kind of like fell forward on the mat, and then he jumped guillotine. So I don't think that Mike's gonna be in that situation. And even if Mike was in that situation, he's much better at getting up. He's not going to get guillotined. He's just not. You're not going to
that's not
guillotine
going to happen.
Michael Chandler in the first round or the second round, or probably not the third round either, unless he's already super gassed. So I just don't see how he's going to get it where he's on top in the grappling, where he can even try submissions. And we saw at the end with Charles, where you would think that's going to be the most vulnerable that Mike's going to be. And Charles decided that there was nothing he was going to land that was going to be worth it. So it better to just control Michael Chandler at the end rather than try and go for submissions. So I just don't see how he's going to do it other than by a decision. But if Michael Chandler doesn't have to regulate for 5 rounds, he could just set his gas tank up for the 3 rounds. He's going to be putting a lot of volume in that first round and that second round. So tough to win a decision.
Yeah, an angry and motivated Michael Chandler.
Oh, he's
that sounds like
having the quotes.
Huh? Oh,
he's going to be having the quotes.
What? He's going to have a TED talk on stage. He's going to, if he knocks out Patty, he's going to have a TED talk motivational speech of the year in the octagon. Like, angry and motivated Michael Chandler is a dangerous Michael Chandler. Because he's already salty that he hasn't been able to like fight for the last 2 years. He could have fought 3 times since the Ultimate Fighter, but he's been waiting on Conor McGregor, and Conor McGregor kept on giving him the banana in the tailpipe. Like, he kept on just being like, "Oh, you remember that commercial? Oh, you gotta be quicker than that." You know, when the guy has the little like fishing rod where he's like
the Starburst.
Yeah, I think it's like Starburst. I think it was Starburst commercial where he's got the Starburst on the hook, huh?
Maybe Skittles.
Maybe, or was it an insurance commercial? I can't remember. Yeah. But the guy with the fishing hook, he's just like, the person's trying to reach for whatever it is, and he's just like, "Whoops, you're too slow." And they kept on like being like, "Yeah, we're gonna fight," and then be like, "Nah, we're not gonna fight." "Yeah, we're gonna fight." No, we're not gonna fight. And then, "Yeah, we're gonna fight." And it was 2 weeks away from having a fight. And he was like, Nah, we're not gonna fight. So you imagine Michael Chandler's got to be like raring to go right now. So I feel like it's a scary situation for Patty Pimblett. I feel like it will be a fun fight, but I don't know, man. But a fight that's gonna be, I think, a really big pick. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I could see paths to victory for both fighters a lot easier. Is the Yair Rodriguez versus Patricio Pitbull? That's gonna be an exciting fight.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm guessing, but I think that most UFC fans will have at least heard the name Patricio, especially because he has his brother. So at least people just in the ether might have heard of at least one of the Pitbull brothers. So I really like this. I'm glad he's in the UFC finally. I mean, he's 37, so he doesn't have a lot of time to work with, but I think that this is an exciting fight, an exciting matchup. There's a huge height difference for sure. I mean, Yair is a full like 4 or 5 inches taller than him, but I mean, we saw with Volk, who's a smaller guy. He's just gonna have to get inside and work his power, and he's got plenty of it, and he's shown it before. So I think up at 45 is where he belongs. I think he's kind of stuck around at 35 too long when he was in Bellator, and I think that kind of weight cut had a lot to do, in my opinion, with his loss to Sergio Pettis in Bellator. I think that he's much more suited to 45 at this point in his career. I think that he was able to kind of do both when he was really fully in his prime and still had a lot of youth and longevity like that. But I think once you get kind of around your mid to late 30s, I think you can't really do two weight classes at the same time anymore. You got to fill out into the one where you belong at this point. And I think featherweight is definitely where Patricio belongs. And I think it'll be super exciting. I don't know how it's going to go, but it's definitely a banger that is going to be a good introduction either way for UFC fans and a good opportunity for Yair to step in there in Miami on the main card against a former champion from another organization and kind of move yourself back in now that everything's opened back up at the top of the division.
Mhm. Yeah, it's an exciting fight. Like we were talking, because you have Yair Rodriguez, who's one of the most exciting, dangerous strikers. Who just when I feel like he's not in boring fights, and he's very good striker, very dynamic and like quick, and you know what I mean, the explosiveness. And then you have Patricio Pitbull, who is also a tremendous striker, very durable, got crazy power. I I don't know. I don't think I'm calling it too soon, but I feel like whenever in the past, when you've had a fight on paper that looks like it's going to be a barn burner, it ends up one of two ways. Either it's gonna be one of the best fights on that card, maybe the entire year, or it's going to be what we got from the Jairzinho Sergey fight, right? Either we're gonna get a Michael Chandler versus Justin Gaethje and a John Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson type fight, or we're gonna get a Sergey versus Jairzinho or like Derek Lewis versus like Francis type fight. So it's either or, because it's like when you get two really high level strikers, either it's going to be a barn burner of a fight, or they're going to be everyone either or. Both fighters are very aware of what the other fighter is good at, and it's going to be a lot of like high level chess that's going on in there. You know what I mean? Where they're like feinting and being like, "Oop, no, maybe this one. Oh no, maybe like this shot, or oh, like you know what I mean?" Where they're like a lot of taking pictures, a lot of fainting, a lot of like high level chess going on in their heads, because no one wants to end up on the other person's highlight reel, and you know what the other person is good at, so you're trying to like stay out of the way and kind of like do this and that. Maybe for some fans they could see like, oh man, this is a very high level chess match that's going on. To a lot of feints, a lot of head moving, a lot of this, that. But to the average fan might be just like, these dudes are just standing there and just circling around each other. Or it's going to be like, oh my God, did you see that flying knee? Did you see that tornado kick? Did you see that overhand? Did you see that rolling thunder out of nowhere? Like the ones and twos, the overhands, they're going back and forth, back and forth. This is crazy. Like type fight. So I'm hoping for the fun, exciting fight, but I guess we'll have to see. I think this is a very one of the debuts I'm most excited for.
Yeah,
Is to have like a star from another organization.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the bigger ones that you could have had that you would say, hey, who's not in the UFC and who can we get? Definitely one of the top ones and could really be useful now that Topuria is going up to 55. But you mentioned, hesitancy and kind of not pulling the trigger and just fainting. I did want to say I was very happy to see Coach Eric Nixick publicly kind of say that he apologized to Sean Strickland about what he said and that the way that it made their team look and him look and Sean look and how he regretted saying those things in that way at that time. I thought it was super blunt to say those things in the first place, but I could respect the truth of it. And now that he's seen how Sean's reacted to that, another big respect to notice like the impact you've had on someone you care about, and to say, hey, that wasn't my intent, but I realized that I hurt you with that. So that was my bad. I shouldn't have done that. So I hope that moving forward, obviously those guys can, you've had the apology, they can hug it out and keep going forward, because they've had a ton of success together. They obviously mean a lot to each other. And those are the type of relationships that make martial arts and MMA a force for good in the world. So I was really happy to see that they're going to keep going together, and that there's no break in that relationship.
For sure, for sure. The fight for you, the I think this is probably going to be one of the more one-sided fights, in my opinion. I don't know what you think of this next fight, the Carlos Prates versus Jeff Neal fight.
Well, here's the thing.
I feel like it feels very one-sided. You know what I mean? Where I think that this is going to be another first-round knockout for Carlos Prates. I think he's going to get like a fifth walk-off KO, and then just kind of move his way into the rankings. But does this feel as does it feel as one-sided for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're saying what we're all thinking for sure. The only thing is, and if I was the UFC, even run a promo that says this, you never know which Jeff Neal's going to show up.
That is true.
So this could be an absolute like back and forth classic, or this could just be, Carlos Prates waltzes into the top 10 or top 5 or wherever Jeff's ranked right now. But I always have to keep that one part in my mind that, hey, you never know what Jeff Neal's going to show up. So when you're thinking, oh man, Jeff Neal's totally got this, you never know which Jeff Neal's going to show up. If you think there's no way Jeff Neal's going to win this, you never know which Jeff Neal might show up.
That is true. That is very true. But I'm really thinking this is about to be Carlos Prates' big debut into the top 10, because he's already ranked 13. I think he goes in there. I think this is like 90-10 Carlos Prates.
On paper right now, for sure.
On paper, right? On paper, yeah. It's feeling very 90-10 Carlos Prates as far as who's going to get the win. And gets the top 10 ranking, and then a lot of fights open up for him. Because I imagine Carlos Prates is a very hard person to get fights matched up for, because of the power in his hands and the speed and power that he possesses. And all of his fights have been walk-off KOs. Like, I imagine if you're someone in the top 10, you're like, that's a hard night in the office for anybody. Like, I feel like if you're someone in the top 10, top 5, you're like, I could take that fight. Or there's other fights in the top 10 that are a lot better as far as your championship contendency, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're number 7 or you're number 10 or number 12, there's a bunch of other people you can be facing above you that will help you get closer to a belt than someone as dangerous as Carlos Prates at number 13. So all the respect to like Jeff Neal for taking such a dangerous opponent, such a serious contender for future title contention, who is like 3-4 spots underneath him in the rankings.
Yeah.
So mad respect to him for that. but also I feel like Carlos. This is gonna be another first round win for Carlos. But like you said, we never know what Carlos, what Jeff Neal we're gonna get. If Jeff Neal can beat Carlos Prates and stop the hype train that is Carlos Prates, he steals all that momentum and hype. I feel like,
Yeah,
and you can.
there's other guys for sure at welterweight, but there's also guys that if he can put on a performance to beat a guy like Carlos Prates, there's guys who are ahead of him that he could well beat.
Mm-hmm. I think you call out. I think you can make after such a crazy upset. I think you can make a crazy request if you beat Carlos Prates.
Yeah, you could call out someone like Kamaru Usman, who has to be somewhere near healthy, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Because normally Jeff Neal calling out Kamaru Usman would sound crazy.
Yeah,
but you do the crazy. You pull off the crazy upset. I feel like you are all within your rights to make a crazy request.
Yeah.
And then let's say you beat Kamaru Usman. Oh man, keep making more crazy requests. If you're like, hey, I want a title shot. Because if you beat Carlos Prates and you beat Kamaru Usman, I feel like you've earned your right to be like, hey, I want to fight for the belt. But both of those are very high, very, very, very tough challenges.
For sure. And speaking of crazy, by the way, I was just glancing ahead. So full disclosure for everybody, we're recording this at the time of the prelims for the UFC fight night in Seattle, Henry Cejudo versus Song Yadong. And every single fight to this point has been won by KO TKO by punches. Every single one.
Yo! Oh man, okay.
One,
I got
two,
so
three,
because
five.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
5 in a row. The first
That's
5
crazy.
fights.
That's crazy. Let's end it here because it's been almost 3 hours. That's our time. That's our music. I hope you guys had a good time watching the show, checking it out. We had a good time recording it. Like, subscribe, share, comment. You know what I mean? Appreciate y'all coming on and come back next week. We'll have more show, more stuff to talk about. We'll fully review the card that's going on right now, so that will be exciting. We'll have more news, more fight news that will come up, more stuff to talk about. So yeah, come back. It'll be awesome. It'll be great. Actually, we'll see y'all later. Enjoy yourselves. Bye.